Hello. Hello, hello. Hey, Wadsworth. Thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. The plan is to play a game called Coffee Talk. And it just looks so cozy and so comforting. And I think you're just making coffee for people and like talking with them and stuff. And that sounds wonderful. I think it lasts like 2 weeks' time in the game. And I mean, who doesn't love coffee? So I will definitely be drinking coffee while streaming. If I remember. Hopefully I will. I probably won't, but hopefully I will. But that's the plan, is to play Coffee Talk. And I think, I mean, we all know how the internet lies when it says how long it takes to play a game. Monkey Island. But it says that it only takes 4 hours, like if you're just going with the main story. So we'll see. We'll see. And of course, like if we end early or whatever, depending on how long, we'll probably just do reading sprints after. Because it's not like I never have anything to read. I never have any books just waiting for me. Ever. Never. Oh my gosh. Okay. Reading updates. I still have books that I haven't even touched yet that are waiting for me. But from the library, I have Akira Volume 2 and Yotsuba Volume 8, thanks to Star for recommending that one. I'm still continuing the series and will like finish the series, but just reading it off stream. Um, and okay, I think, oh, and I'm reading The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And then during reading sprints, I'm reading this one, Perfume by Patrick Suskind. Oh, I did not give the full title, excuse me. Perfume, the story of a murderer. And it is bleak. It's so very bleak, and wonderful, and I have been really enjoying it. It's about this guy, I'll just read the back. In the slums of the 18th century Paris, a baby is born. Jean Baptiste Grenouille clings to life with an iron will, growing into a dark and sinister young man who, although he has no scent of his own, possesses an incomparable sense of smell. He apprentices himself to a perfumer and quickly masters the ancient art of mixing flowers, herbs, and oils. But his request to create the ultimate perfume leads him to commit a series of brutal murders until no woman can feel safe as his final horrifying secret is revealed. Just some super uplifting things, you know? You know what I mean? But it's really good. It's enjoyable. This is recommended by Jag from chat. I know. And before we even got to page 50, we had our first murder. So it's all very exciting. But today we are reading Don Quixote. Look how far we are. It's so exciting. I feel like the second part is going so much faster than the first part. We're already starting chapter 22 today, which we started. This is the third day of part two, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I feel like we're going pretty quickly. We're on page 597. So that's several books that you could have read instead of one. But we're still going. We're just trucking along. I'm trying to see what happened last. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So Don Quixote and Sancho Panza went to a wedding. And neither of them are like involved. They don't know anybody part of it or anything like that. But they go to this wedding, and this one, like, the woman is like not in love with the person that she's marrying. She's actually in love with somebody else, and that somebody else like is madly in love with her, but he just doesn't have the money or the class to be a suitable husband, according to like her parents. And so she has been promised to somebody else who has like a higher rank and whatever. So this is their wedding day. And the guy who Camacho, the guy who is she is not marrying, comes out and professes his love and says that he can't live without her and all of that, and then stabs himself, like puts his sword down and then just falls on his sword and then is just like bleeding like on the floor in front of everybody, you know, as one does. And so Don Quixote like runs up to him and he Camacho says like, please just promise me, I forgot her name. Quiteria. Yes. Please promise me that you will love me and you will be, you know, like my wife until I die. And she's like, and everyone's like, please just like do it so that he can like die peacefully. And so she does. And then he just like hops up and is like, yeah, I'm not dying. Now I'm married to her. And then the guy that she's supposed to marry is just like, huh, well, I guess I'm not getting married today, but everybody enjoy the meal, enjoy the music. Let me see like what else happened because that was the last thing that happened, but I am sure the lions, was that the last time too? I think it was. I feel like so much happened this last time that it's just hard to remember. So there was also these two cages that are traveling, and Don Quixote and Sancho Panza come across it, and in the cages are lions. And Don Quixote is like, well, bring them out here. I will fight these lions and I will be victorious. And the lion keeper is like, no, we're not going to do that. These lions are for the king, and that's where we're going. We're delivering the lions to the king. We're not going to just release the lions because you will die, obviously. And Don Quixote's like, no, 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 no. You don't understand. I am Don Quixote of La Mancha, and I will fight these lions, and I will win. So the lion keeper opens the cage. The lion just like looks at Don Quixote and then just like turns around back into the cage. And Don Quixote's like, excellent. Okay, smack the lion, provoke the lion so that it'll come out, and then I will fight the lion and win. And the lion keeper's like, you should just take this as a win. The lion clearly doesn't want to fight you because you are clearly superior. Don Quixote's like, you know what, you're right. I will take this as a win. And there was one other thing that happened last time, and I just, for the life of me, cannot remember what it is. But I know that there was a third something. Eh, eh, that's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Exactly, exactly. So yeah, as always, if we come across something that like I didn't mention or whatever, I will do a little sidebar. Remind us all, including probably myself, of what's going on. So, without further ado, let's get to it. All right, chapter 22, which recounts the great adventure of the cave of Montesinos that lies in the heart of La Mancha, which was successfully concluded by the valiant Don Quixote of La Mancha. Great and many were the gifts presented to Don Quixote by the newlyweds, who were indebted to him for the actions he had taken in defense of their cause. They deemed his intelligence equal to his courage, considering him a Cid in arms and a Cicero in elegance. Our good Sancho had a wonderful time for 3 days at the couple's expense. From them he learned that the scheme to feign a wound had not been communicated to fair Quiteria, but was Basilio's idea. He had hoped to achieve with it exactly what occurred. It is certainly true that he confessed to sharing part of his thinking with some of his friends, so that when it was necessary, they would favor his plan and support his decision. That's right, she was supposed to marry Camacho and ended up marrying Basilio. I mixed the names up. Excuse me. They cannot and should not be called deceptions, said Don Quixote, since their purpose was virtuous. And two lovers marrying was a most excellent purpose. But he warned that the greatest adversary love has is hunger and continual need, because love is all joy, happiness, and contentment, especially when the lover is in possession of the beloved, and its declared enemies are want and poverty. He was saying all of this so that Señor Basilio would stop practicing the skills he knew, for although they brought him fame, they did not bring him money, and attend to acquiring wealth by licit and industrious means, which the prudent and diligent never lack. There are too many characters, too many pages, the sentences are too long, I can't keep track. And also there's a ton of names in here that like reference other either historical people or historical fictional people and places, and it's just like I don't know who is who. You're lucky I remember Don Quixote's name. The honorable poor man, if a poor man can be honorable, possesses a jewel when he has a beautiful wife, and when that is taken from him, his honor is taken away and destroyed. The beautiful, honorable woman whose husband is poor deserves to be crowned with laurels and palms of victory and triumph. Beauty in and of itself attracts the desires of all who look upon it and recognize it, and royal eagles and high-flying birds swoop down for it as if it were savory bait. But if this beauty is joined to need and want, it is also attacked by crows, kites, and other birds of prey, and the woman who stands firm through so many encounters surely deserves to be called her husband's crown. Oh my gosh, Noodles! 4 heckin' months? It's 5 months too few. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the 4 months. I'm so glad that you're here. Good to see you also. Hello. Hi. Look, my clever friend Basilio, added Don Quixote. It was believed by some wise man or other that there was only one virtuous woman in the entire world, and he advised each man to think and believe that the one virtuous woman was his wife, and in this way he would live contentedly. I am not married, and so far it has not even crossed my mind to marry, and yet I should dare to counsel any man who asks my advice how to find the woman he wishes to marry. First, I should advise him to consider her reputation more than her wealth, because the virtuous woman does not achieve a good reputation simply by being good, but by appearing to be good. Women's honor is damaged more by public liberties and acts of boldness than by secret iniquities. If you bring a virtuous woman to your house, it will be easy to maintain and even improve that virtue, but if she is immoral, it will be a formidable task to change her, for it is not very likely that she will pass from one extreme to another. I do not say it is impossible, but I consider it extremely difficult. Excellent, enjoy your lurk. And your dinner, of course. Sancho heard this, and to himself he said, "This master of mine, when I talk about things of pith and substance, usually says that I could take a pulpit in hand and go through the world preaching fine sermons, and I say of him that when he begins to string together judgments and to give advice, he could not only take a pulpit in hand, but hang two on each finger, and go through the squares and say exactly the right thing. What a devil of a knight-errant you are, and what a lot of things you know! I thought in my heart that he would only know things that had to do with his chivalry, but there's nothing he can't pick at or poke his spoon into." Sancho was mumbling this, and his master heard him and asked, "What are you mumbling about, Sancho?" "I'm not saying anything, and I'm not mumbling anything. responded Sancho. I was just saying to myself that I wish I'd heard what your grace said here before I married. Maybe then I'd be saying now, the ox who's free can lick wherever he pleases. And there is a note after that, and it says, a proverb that extols the joys of liberty. Ew is the exact response that I had as well. The ox who's free can lick where he pleases. Oh. Is your Teresa so bad, Sancho? Said Don Quixote. She's not very bad, responded Sancho, but she's not very good either. At least, she's not as good as I'd like. It is wrong of you, Sancho, said Don Quixote, to speak ill of your wife, who is, in fact, the mother of your children. We don't owe each other a thing, responded Sancho, because she speaks ill of me too whenever she feels like it, especially when she's jealous, and then not even Satan himself can bear her. In short, they spent 3 days with the newlyweds and were regaled and entertained as if they were kings. Don Quixote asked the skilled licentiate to give him a guide who would lead him to the cave of Montesinos, because he had a great desire to enter it and see with his own eyes if the marvels told about it throughout the surrounding area were true. And there are 2 notes. First note is after skilled licentiate, and it says, the reference is to the expert swordsman whom they met on the road at the beginning of chapter 19, and who obviously accompanied them throughout the episode of Camacho's wedding. Obviously. And then the second note is after Cave of Montesinos, and it says, the cave is near one of the lakes of Ruidera, the source of the Guadiana River. The licentiate said that he would give him one of his cousins, who was a famous student and very fond of reading novels of chivalry, and would be very happy to bring him to the mouth of the cave and show him the lakes of Ruidera, famous in all of the Mancha, and even in all of Spain. And he said that he would find him pleasant company because he was a lad who knew how to write books that would be printed, and how to dedicate them to princes. At last, the cousin arrived on a pregnant donkey, its pack saddle covered by a small stripped rug or brightly colored burlap. Sancho saddled Rocinante, readied the donkey, and provisioned his saddle-bags, that then joined the cousins, which were also well stocked. And after commending themselves to God and taking their leave of everyone, they set out on their journey, traveling in the direction of the famous cave of Montesinos. On the road, Don Quixote questioned the cousin regarding the character and nature of his activities, his profession, and his studies, to which he responded that his profession was being a humanist, his activities and studies composing books for publishing, all of them very beneficial and less diverting for the nation. One was entitled On Liveries, in which he depicts 703 liveries with their colors, devices, and emblems, from which courtier knights could pick and choose the ones they liked for festivals and celebrations, and would not have to go begging them from anything or overtaxing their brains, as they say, in order to find ones that matched their desires and intentions. Because I give to the jealous, the disdained, the forgotten, and the absent the liveries that suit them best and fit them perfectly, I also have another book that I intend to call Metamorphosis, or The Spanish Ovid, a new and rare invention, because in it, in a parodic imitation of Ovid, I describe who La Heralda of Seville was, and the Angel of the Magdalena, and oh no, the names, and the Vicenguera drain pipe in Cordoba, and the bulls of Guisando, and the Sierra Morena, and the fountains of Legenitos, and Lavapiés, in Madrid, not forgetting the fountains of El Piojo and El Caño Dorado, and the mountain of La Prioria. Not Peoria. Priora. There we go. And each has its allegories, metaphors, and transformations that delight, astonish, and instruct, all at the same time. Yeah, the book Metamorphosis is totally about turning into a bug and just frightening your family, burdening them, and they already don't like you, and now they're just terrified of you. Thanks, Kafka. There are several notes in this sentence, so let me see if I can find them all. Okay, the first one is after Angel of the Magdalena, and it says, the weather vane on the tower of the church of the Magdalena in Salamanca was in the shape of an angel. And then after Vicinguera drain pipe in Cordoba, it says, the pipe that carried Cordoba's sewage into the Guadalquivir River. Gross. And then after La Priora says, the first two were in the Prado de San Jerónimo, and the third in the Plaza de Oriente in Madrid. Totally stole the idea from Cervantes. Absolutely. That is obvious. I have another book that I call Supplement to Virgilio Polidoro, which deals with the invention of things and is a work of great erudition and scholarship. Because the things of substance that Polidoro omitted, I investigate and write about in an elegant style. And of course, there's a note after Supplement to Virgilio Polidoro, and it says, the book of the Italian humanist Polidoro Virgilio. Well, I guess if it's Italian, they probably do say the G's. Virgilio? I don't know. I don't speak Italian. That might come as a shock. De Inventoribus Rerum, which deals with the origin of inventions, was widely read. It was translated into Spanish in 1550. Virgilio forgot to tell us who was the first man in the world to have a cold, and the first to use ointments to cure himself of the French disease. I elucidate everything very precisely, citing more than 25 authors, and so your grace can see that I have done good work, and that the book will be very useful to everyone. There's a note after French disease, and it says, a Spanish term for syphilis. There you go. Sancho, who had been very attentive during the cousin's narration, said, tell me, senor, and may God give you good luck in the printing of your books. Would you know, and you must know, because you know everything, but could you tell me who the first man was to scratch his head? To my mind, it must have been our father Adam. Yes, it must have been, responded the cousin, because Adam undoubtedly had a head and hair, and this being the case, and Adam being the first man in the world, at some time he must have scratched his head. I think so too, responded Sancho. But now tell me, who was the first acrobat in the world? The truth is, my friend, responded the cousin, that is something that I cannot determine until I study it, and I shall study it as soon as I return to my books, and I shall satisfy your curiosity when next we meet, for this cannot be the last time. Well, look, senor, replied Sancho, don't go to any trouble, for I just found the answer to the question I asked. Let me say that the first acrobat in the world was Lucifer, when he was tossed or thrown out of heaven and went tumbling down into the pit. You're right, my friend, said the cousin. And Don Quixote said, that question and answer are not yours, Sancho. You heard someone else say them. Be quiet, senor, replied Sancho, for by my faith, if I start asking and answering, I won't finish until tomorrow. As for asking fool questions and giving nonsensical answers, I don't need to go around asking my neighbors for help." "You have said more, Sancho, than you realize," said Don Quixote. "For there are some who exhaust themselves learning and investigating things that, once learned and investigated, do not matter in the slightest to the understanding or the memory." The day was spent in this agreeable conversation, and others like it, and at night they stayed in a small village which, the cousin told Don Quixote, was no more than 2 leagues from the cave of Montesinos, and if he was determined to go inside, he would need to have ropes so that he could tie them around himself and lower himself into its depths. Don Quixote said that even if the cave went down into the abyss, he had to see where it ended, and so they bought almost 100 fathoms of rope, and the next day, at 2 in the afternoon, they reached the cave, whose mouth is spacious and wide, but filled with brambles and box-thorn, wild fig trees and briars, so thick and intertwined that they completely cover and hide it. As soon as they saw it, the cousin, Sancho, and Don Quixote dismounted, and the first 2 tied him very securely with the ropes, and while they were wrapping them around him and tightening them, Sancho said, "Señor, your grace should think about what you're doing. You don't want to be buried alive, or be in a place where you're like a jar that's hung down a well to cool. Oh yes, it isn't your grace's concern or business to go exploring this place that must be worse than a dungeon." "Tie the rope and be quiet," responded Don Quixote. "For an undertaking like this, Sancho, my friend, my end was—" Let me start that over. "Tie the rope and be quiet," responded Don Quixote. "For an undertaking like this, Sancho, my friend, was intended only for me." There's a note after that, and it says, Don Quixote paraphrases the words of a ballad. Oh, would not have picked that up. And then their guide said, "I beg your grace, Señor Don Quixote, that you observe carefully and scrutinize with 1,000 eyes what you find inside. Perhaps there are things I can put in my book, Transformations." "The tambourine's in just the right hands," responded Sancho Panza. There's a note after that, and it says, "The phrase means that matters are being handled by someone competent." This being said, and Don Quixote's ropes having been secured, they were attached not to his armor, but to the doublet he wore underneath. Don Quixote said, "It was an oversight not to have brought a small cowbell to tie next to me on this rope, for its sound would let you know that I was still descending and still alive. But since that is no longer possible, may the hand of God guide me." And then he kneeled and said a prayer in a quiet voice, asking God to help him and grant him good fortune in this apparently dangerous new adventure. And then he said aloud, "O lady of my actions and movements, most illustrious and peerless Dulcinea of Toboso, if it is possible that the prayers and supplications of this thy fortunate lover reach thine ears, for the sake of thy extraordinary beauty, I implore thee to hear them, for they beg thee only not to deny me thy favor and protection now that I am in such great need of them. I am going to throw myself, and plunge into the abyss I see here before me, so that the world may know that if thou favorest me, nothing is impossible for me to undertake and bring to a happy conclusion." And saying this, he approached the chasm. He saw that it was not possible to lower himself or make his way to the entrance except by the strength of his arm or the thrust of his blade, and so he put his hand on his sword and began to slash and cut the thicket at the mouth of the cave. With a clamor and din, an infinite number of huge crows and rooks flew out of it, and there were so many flying so quickly that they knocked Don Quixote to the ground. If he were as much of a soothsayer as he was a Catholic Christian, he would have taken this as a bad omen and refused to go down into such a place. At last he stood, and seeing that no more crows or other nocturnal birds, such as bats, which had come out along with the crows, were flying about, and with the cousin and Sancho gradually letting out the rope, he began to lower himself down to the bottom of the fearful cavern. And as he entered, Sancho blessed him and made the sign of 1,000 crosses over him, saying, "May God be your guide, and the Peña de Francia, together with the trident de Gaeta, O flour and cream and skimmings of all knights-errant." And there is a note after Peña de Francia, and it says, "The Dominican monastery between Ciudad Rodrigo and Salamanca." And then there is a note after Trinidad, and it says, "A monastery near Naples that is visible from the sea and invoked by mariners." There you go, the bravest in the world, heart of steel and arms of bronze. Again, may God be your guide and bring you back safe and sound and free to the light of this life that you are leaving to bury yourself in the darkness you are looking for. The cousin said almost the same prayers and entreaties. Don Quixote kept calling out for rope, more rope, and they paid it out slowly. And when his cries, which were channeled out of the cave, could no longer be heard, they had already unwound the 100 fathoms of rope, and it seemed to them that they ought to bring Don Quixote up again, since they could not give him more rope. But they waited for about half an hour, and at the end of that time they began to pull up the rope very easily, and with no weight on it at all, which made them imagine that Don Quixote had remained inside, and because he believed this, Sancho began to cry bitterly, and to pull very quickly in order to learn the truth. But when there was a little more than 80 fathoms of rope left, they felt the weight, which made them extremely happy. Finally, when they were 10 fathoms remaining, they saw Don Quixote clearly, and Sancho began to shout to him, saying, "A very hearty welcome to your grace, señor. We thought you were going to stay down there and start a family." Hey, Duddy. He was just lowered into a cave. Super casual. No big deal. But Don Quixote did not say a word, and when they had pulled him all the way out, they saw that his eyes were closed, as if he were sleeping. They laid him on the ground and untied him, and still he did not awaken, but they turned him this way and that, and shook him and moved him so much that after a fairly long time he regained consciousness, stretching as if he were waking from a deep and profound sleep. And looking around, as if in alarm, he said, "May God forgive you, friends, if you have taken me away from the sweetest life and most pleasant sights that any human being has ever seen or experienced. In truth, now I realize that all the pleasures of this life pass like shadows and dreams, or wither like the flowers in the fields. O unfortunate Montesinos! O gravely wounded Durandarte! O luckless Belerma! O weeping Guadiana! And you unhappy daughters of Ruidera, who show in your waters the number of tears shed by your beautiful eyes." He's totally just trying to play Tears of the Kingdom. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just going for a quick cave dive. The cousin and Sancho listened to the words of Don Quixote, who spoke them as if he were tearing them, with great sorrow from the very depths of his being. They begged him to explain what he was saying, and to tell them what he had seen in that hell. "You call it hell?" said Don Quixote. "Do not call it that, for it does not deserve the name, as you soon shall see." He asked them to give him something to eat, for he was very hungry. They spread the cousin's burlap on the green grass, had recourse to the provisions in the saddleback, and the three of them sat in companionable friendship and ate both dinner and supper at the same time. When the burlap had been closed, Don Quixote of La Mancha said, "Let no one get up, my friends, and listen to me carefully." End of chapter 22. I wonder what was in the cave. Like, did he go all the way down? I don't know. Well, he must have, because when they started pulling it up, there was no weight. So that's what I'm thinking, is that he did make it down and then was just like wandering about. We'll see. We'll see. We're the three best friends that we could have. We're the three best friends that. Exactly. I hope that they were singing that while they were eating both their dinner and their supper. Scandalous. At the same time. Wow. Wow. Chapter 23. Regarding the remarkable things that the great Don Quixote said he saw in the depths of the cave of Montesinos, so impossible and extraordinary that his adventure had been considered apocryphal. It must have been 4 in the afternoon, when the sun, hidden by clouds, its light faint and its rays temperate, gave Don Quixote an opportunity free of oppressive heat to recount what he had seen in the cave of Montesinos to his 2 illustrious listeners, and he began in the following manner. Oh, you're totally right. They definitely sang it, but in Spanish. You're right, you're right. In this dungeon, at the depth of approximately 12 or 14 escudos, on the right-hand side there is a concavity, a space capable of holding a large wagon with its mules. There's a note already. It is after escudos, and it says, a unit of measurement roughly 7 feet, used to determine height or depth. A small amount of light comes in through openings in the earth's surface. I saw this concavity in space when I was already weary and tired of hanging and being suspended from the rope as I moved through that dark nether region without a fixed and certain route, and so I decided to go into this space and rest a while. I shouted to you, asking that you not let out more rope until I told you to, but you probably did not hear me. I picked up the rope you sent down, made it into a coil or ring, and sat on it, becoming very thoughtful as I considered how I would reach the bottom without anything to support me. And when I was deep in this thought and confusion, suddenly, and without my wishing it, I was overcome by a profound sleep. And when I least expected it, not knowing how or why, I awoke and found myself in the midst of the most beautiful, pleasant, and charming meadows that nature could create, or the most discerning human mind imagine. I opened my eyes wide, rubbed them, and saw that I was not sleeping, but really awake. Even so, I felt my head and chest to verify whether it was I, myself, or some false and counterfeit phantom sitting there, but my sense of touch, my feelings, the reasoned discourse I held with myself, verified for me that, there, and then, I was the same person I am here and now. Then there appeared before my eyes a royal and sumptuous palace, or castle whose walls and ramparts seemed to be made of clear and transparent crystal. 2 large doors opened, and I saw that through them there emerged and came toward me a venerable ancient dressed in a long hooded cloak of 2 purple bayas that trailed after him on the ground. Around his shoulders and chest he wore a scholar's sash and hood of green satin. His head was covered by a black Milanese cap, and a snow-white beard reached down below his waist. He carried no weapons of any kind, but held a rosary in his hand, the smaller beads larger than the medium-sized walnuts, and the larger ones the size of medium-sized ostrich eggs. His bearing, pace, gravity, and proud demeanor, each one taken separately, and all of them taken together, filled me with wonder and amazement. There are a couple notes. One is after green satin, and it says, this was worn by the holders of doctoral degrees. And after Milanese cap, and it says, round caps that were stiffened by metal bands. Exactly. We were the 3 amigos. Yeah. Yep. He came up to me, and the first thing he did was embrace me closely, and then he said, "For many long years, O valiant knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, we who dwell in this enchanted solitude have waited to see thee, so that thou couldst inform the world of what lies contained and hidden in the deep cave which thou hast entered, called the Cave of Montesinos, a feat reserved only for thy invincible heart and wondrous courage. Come thou with me, illustrious knight, for I wish to show thee the marvels hidden within this transparent castle, of which I am warden and perpetual chief guardian, for I am the same Montesinos after whom the cave is named." Hey Falcor, good to see you. Oh my gosh, you never have to apologize. And I know we're making moves. We're in it. Just making our way through, making our way downtown. When he told me that he was Montesinos, I asked him if the story told about him in the world up here was true, that with a small dagger he had cut out of his chest the heart of his great friend Durandarte, and carried it to the Lady Bellerma, as his friend had commanded when he was at the point of death. There are two notes. One is after Montesinos, and it says, "Montesinos, an important character in the Spanish ballads that recount the legend of Charlemagne, does not appear in French literature. Don Quixote's adventure is based on the tradition that has Montesinos marrying Rosa Florida, mistress of the castle of Rocafrida, that was identified in the popular imagination with certain ruins near the cave of Montesinos." And then the second note is after his great friend Durandarte, and it says, "Durandarte, a name originally given to the sword of Roland, became a hero of the Spanish, though not the French, Carolingian ballad tradition. He was the cousin and close friend of Montesinos, whom he asked before he was killed at Roncesvalles to carry his heart to his lady." That is disgusting. One, I would not want to be the friend to cut out my friend's heart and then carry it with me. Gross. And two, I don't want to receive a human heart. Like, if I need one, sure, transplant would be great. Just friendship things. Oh man, and can you imagine? Like, there's no refrigeration. This heart is gonna be nasty by the time it got there. Duddy, thank you so much. Piano. Making our way downfield, charging fast, giants pass. Or are they windmills? That's great. So good. He responded that everything people said was true, except for the dagger, because it was not a dagger, and it was not small, but a blade striated on 3 sides, and sharper than an awl. "That blade," said Sancho, "must have been made by Ramon de Hoces, the Sevillan." "I do not know," continued Don Quixote, "but it probably was not the work of that knife maker, since Ramon lived yesterday, and the battles at Roncesvalles, where his misfortune occurred, happened many years ago. This inquiry is of no importance, for it does not disturb or confound the truth and validity of the history." "That is true," responded the cousin. "Your grace should continue, Señor Don Quixote, for I am listening to you with the greatest pleasure in the world." Totally violating the Geneva Convention with that 3-edged blade. I'm calling them up right now. Excuse me, Geneva. With no less pleasure, do I recount it, responded Don Quixote. And so I say that the venerable Montesinos led me into the crystalline palace where, in a downstairs chamber that was exceptionally cool and made all of alabaster, there was a marble sepulchre crafted with great skill, and on it I saw a knight stretched out to his full length, and made not of bronze or armor or jasper, as is usual on their sepulchres. Excuse me. That, for some reason, that word's hard. But of pure flesh and pure bone. His right hand, which seemed somewhat hairy and sinewy to me, a sign that its owner was very strong, lay over his heart, and before I could ask anything of Montesinos, who saw me looking with wonder at the figure on the sepulchre, close, he said, "This is my friend Durandarte, the the flower and model of enamored and valiant knights of his time. Here he lies, enchanted, as I and many others are enchanted, by Merlin, the French enchanter who was, people say, the son of the devil. And what I believe is that he was not the son of the devil, but knew, as they say, a point or two more than the devil. How and why he enchanted us no one knows, but that will be revealed by the passage of time, and is not too far off now, I imagine. What astonishes me is that I know, as well as I know that it is day, that Durandarte ended the days of his life in my arms, and that when he was dead I removed his heart with my own hands, and the truth is that it must have weighed 2 pounds, because according to naturalists, the man who has a larger heart has greater courage than the man whose heart is small. If this is the case, and if this knight really died, why does he now moan and sigh from time to time, as if he were alive?" When this was said, the wretched Durandarte gave a great shout and said, "Oh, my cousin Montesinos, the last thing I asked of you was, when I had breathed my last, and my soul had flown away, to cut my heart out of my breast with a dagger or a blade, and bear it as an offering to my lady, fair Belerma." There's a note after that, and it says, "The poem is composed of lines from several ballads that deal with the subject." Hearing this, the venerable Montesinos fell to his knees before the doleful knight, and, with tears in his eyes, said to him, "Oh, Señor Durandarte, my beloved cousin, I did what you commanded on the ill-fated day of our defeat. I removed your heart the best I could, not leaving any fragments behind in your chest. I cleaned it with a lace handkerchief. I took it and hurried away to France, having first placed you in the bosom of the earth, shedding so many tears that they were enough to wash away the blood that covered my hands after I had put them inside your body. And furthermore, my dearest cousin, in the first village I came to after I left, I sprinkled a little salt on your heart so that it would not smell bad, and would be, if not fresh, at least dried and salted, in the presence of the Lady Belerma, who, along with you and me, and Guadiana, your squire, and her lady-in-waiting, Ruidera, and her 7 daughters and 2 nieces, and many more of your friends and acquaintances, the wise Merlin has kept here, enchanted, for many years, and although more than 500 have passed, none of us have died. The only ones missing are Ruidera and her daughters and nieces, who wept so much that Merlin must have taken pity on them, for he transformed them into lakes, and now, in the world of the living and in the province of La Mancha, they are called the Lakes of Ruidera. 7 of them belong to the kings of Spain, and the 2 nieces belong to the knights of a most holy order called St. John. There's a note after St. John, and it says, "The name of one of the lakes is Del Rey, which means of the king. All the lakes were the property of the crown except for 2, which probably belonged to the knights of St. John of Jerusalem." Guadiana, your squire, also lamented your misfortune, and was transformed into a river that bears his name, When he reached the surface of the earth and saw the sun in another sky, the grief he felt at leaving you was so great that he descended again to the bowels of the earth. But since it is not possible to resist the natural course of his current, from time to time he emerges and shows himself where the sun and all people may see him. The lakes I have mentioned provide him with their waters, and with these and many others that flow into them. He enters Portugal with magnificence and grandeur. Star, thank you so much. 10 months. Amazing. Thank you so much. It's always a joy having you here. Thank you, thank you. Queen Moog. Look as stunning as a palm tree, fully loaded with dates this evening. Yes. Star, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you kept that compliment in your back pocket. Olive, hello. From Malta, can't stay for really long. Oh, no worries. Thank you so much. Glad you were able to hop in and say hi. It's always good to see you. Stop. Fully loaded with dates. Thank you. Oh my, am I blushing? Oh man. I did get a little warm after that, so Let's see. I lost my place. I was too excited. Portugal the Magnificence. Here we are. Okay. But despite this, wherever he goes, he displays his sadness and melancholy, and does not boast of breeding valuable and highly esteemed fish in his waters, but only ones that are coarse and disagreeable, unlike those found in the golden Tahoe. And what I am telling you now, my dear cousin, I have told you many times before, and since you do not respond, I imagine that you do not believe me, or do not hear me, and God knows the grief that causes me. Now I wish to give you some news, and if it does not assuage your sorrow, at least it will not increase it in any way. Know that here in your presence, if you open your eyes, you will see him. You have that great knight about whom the wise Merlin has made so many prophecies. I mean Don Quixote of La Mancha, who once again, and to greater advantage than in past times, has revived in the present a long-forgotten knight-errantry. And through his meditation, and by his favor, it may be that the spell over us will be broken, for great deeds are reserved for great men. And if this is not the case, responded the mournful Durandarte in a low, faint voice, if this is not the case, dear cousin, I say have patience and shuffle the deck. And turning on his side, he resumed his customary silence, and did not utter another word. At this moment a great weeping and wailing was heard, along with deep moans and anguished sobs. I turned my head and saw through the crystal walls a procession of 2 lines of beautiful maidens passing through another chamber, all of them dressed in mourning and wearing white turbans on their heads in the Turkish fashion. At the very end and conclusion of the 2 lines came a matron, for her gravity made her seem one, who dressed in black, and wearing a white train so lengthy and long it brushed the ground. Her turban was twice as large as the largest of the others. She was beetle-browed and snub-nosed. Her mouth was large, but her lips were red. Her teeth, which she may have shown, were few in number and crooked, though as white as peeled almonds. In her hands she carried a delicate cloth, and in it, as far as I could tell, was a heart that had been mummified. It looked so dry and shriveled. Montesinos told me that all the people in the procession were servants of Durandarte and Belerma, enchanted along with their master and mistress, and that the last one, who carried the heart in the cloth, was Senora Belerma herself, who, along with her maidens, walked in that procession 4 days a week and sang, or rather wept, dirges over the body and wounded heart of his cousin, and if she had seemed rather ugly and not as beautiful as her fame proclaimed, the cause was the bad nights and worse days she had spent in that enchantment, as one could see in the deep circles under her eyes and her sickly color. And her sallow complexion and deep circles arise not from the monthly distress common in women, because for many months, even years, she has not had it, nor has it appeared at her portals, but from the sorrow her heart feels for the one she continually holds in her hands, which always renews and brings to mind the affliction of her unfortunate lover. If this were not the case, then the great Dulcinea of Toboso, so celebrated here and in the rest of the world, would barely be her equal in beauty, grace, and charm. "Stop right there, Señor Don Montesinos," I said. I said then, "Your Grace should recount this history in the proper manner, for you know that all comparisons are odious, and there is no reason to compare anyone to anyone else. The peerless Dulcinea of Toboso is who she is, and Señora Belerma is who she is, and who she was, and no more should be said about it." Yep, it has not appeared at her portals. And I don't know if, like, it's coming from so many different people, like Cervantes the author, Don Quixote, or no, rather, Cervantes the author, but this is being written as a chivalric history, but being told by Don Quixote, or relayed by Don Quixote, of what this person said. Please start using that. Please. And please shout it as much as possible too. That all caps energy needs to be shared. Which he responded, "Señor Don Quixote, may your grace forgive me, for I confess that I have erred and misspoke when I said that Señora Dulcinea would barely be the equal of Señora Belerma. For it was enough for me to have realized, by means of I am not certain what conjectures, that your grace is her knight, and I would rather bite my tongue than compare her to anything but heaven itself." You never have to apologize for bad jokes. Bad jokes and bad puns are always welcome here. With this satisfaction given to me by the great Montesinos, my heart recovered from the shock I had received at hearing my lady compared to Belerma. "What surprises me," said Sancho, "is that your grace didn't jump on the old man and break every bone in his body and pull out his beard until there wasn't a single hair left." "No, Sancho, my friend," responded Don Quixote, "it would not have been right for me to do that, because we are all obliged to have respect for the old, even if they are not knights, but especially if they are, and are enchanted as well. I know very well that nothing was wanting in the many other questions and answers that passed between us." At this point, the cousin said, "I don't know, Señor Don Quixote, how your grace could have seen so many things, and spoken so much, and responded to so much in the short amount of time that you were down there." "How long ago did I go down?" asked Don Quixote. "A little more than an hour," said Sancho. "That cannot be," replied Don Quixote, "because night fell and day broke while I was there. And they fell and broke 3 times, and so by my count I have spent 3 days in those remote regions that are hidden from your eyes." "My master must be telling the truth," said Sancho, "since all things that have happened to him have been by enchantment. Maybe what seems like an hour to us seemed like 3 days and nights down there." "That must be so," responded Don Quixote. "And, señor, has your grace eaten in all that time?" asked the cousin. "Not a mouthful has broken my fast," responded Don Quixote. Nor did the thought of hunger even enter my mind. Do the enchanted eat? Asked the cousin. They do not eat, responded Don Quixote, nor do they have excretory wastes, although some believe that their nails, beards, and hair all grow. And by any chance do the enchanted sleep, senor? Asked Sancho. No, certainly not, responded Don Quixote. At least in the 3 days I have been with them, not one of them closed an eye, and neither did I. Here, said Sancho, the proverb fits. Birds of a feather flock together. Your grace flocks with enchanted people who fast and stay awake, so it's no surprise you don't sleep while you're with them. But, senor, your grace will forgive me if I tell you that may God take me, and I was going to say the devil, if I believe a single one of those things you've said here. Time variance. This is now science fiction. Absolutely. What do you mean? Said the cousin. Would Senor Don Quixote lie? And even if he wanted to, he hasn't had time to invent and imagine so many millions of lies. I don't believe my master is lying, responded Sancho. If you do not, then what do you believe? Asked Don Quixote. I believe, responded Sancho, that Merlin, or those enchanters who enchanted that whole crowd your grace says you saw and talked to down there, put into your mind or memory the whole story that you've told us, and the rest that you still have to tell. That could be true, Sancho, replied Don Quixote. But it is not, because what I have recounted I saw with my own eyes and touched with my own hands. But what will you say when I tell you that now, among the infinite things and wonders that Montesinos showed to me, which I tell you in the course of our journey, slowly, and at the proper time, so that they are not all recounted here, Montesinos showed me 3 peasant girls, who were leaping and jumping in those pleasant fields like nanny goats, and as soon as I saw them I recognized one of them as the peerless Dulcinea of Toboso, and the other 2 as those same peasant girls who came with her, the ones we spoke to as we were leaving Toboso. I asked Montesinos if he knew them. He responded that he did not, but he imagined that they must be distinguished ladies who had been enchanted, for they had appeared in those meadows only a few days before, and this should not surprise me, because many other ladies from past and present times were there who had been transformed into many strange figures, among whom he recognized Queen Guinevere and her lady-in-waiting Quintaniona, pouring wine for Lancelot. When he from Brittany came, there's a note after when he from Brittany came, and it says, a line from the ballad about Lancelot that was cited in chapter 8 of the first part. You can be as inspired as you want, Duddy. When Sancho Panza heard his master say this, he thought he would lose his mind or die laughing, since he knew the truth about the feigned enchantment of Dulcinea, for he had been the enchanter, and had invented the story. He recognized beyond the shadow of a doubt that his master was out of his mind, and completely mad, and so he said, it was an evil moment and a worse time, and an ill-fated day when your grace went down to the next world, my dear master, and an unlikely meeting that you had with Señor Montesinos, for see how you've come back to us. Your grace was better up here when you had all your wits, just as God had given them to you, always saying wise things and giving advice, not like now, when you're saying the most foolish things that anybody could imagine. Exactly, Star. Exactly. Some of this would just be like, what? And it totally adds to, like, the enjoyment, too. For sure, for sure. Since I know you, Sancho, responded Don Quixote, I shall ignore your words, and I won't pay attention to your graces. replied Sancho. Not even if you wound me. Not even if you kill me on account of the ones I've said to you, or the ones I plan to say if you don't change and correct yours. But tell me, your grace, now that we're at peace, how and by what signs did you recognize our lady mistress? If you spoke to her, what did you say? And what did she reply? I knew her, responded Don Quixote, because she was wearing the same clothing she wore when you showed her to me. I spoke to her, but she did not say a word to me. Instead, she turned her back and ran away so quickly that a spear could not have overtaken her. I wanted to follow, and would have done so if Montesinos had not advised me not to bother, for it would be in vain, especially since the hour was approaching when I ought to leave the abyss. He also told me that over the course of time he would inform me how the spell on him and Belerma and Durandarte, as well as all the others were there, was to be broken. But of all the grievous things I saw and noted, the one that caused me most sorrow was that, as Montesinos was saying these words to me, one of the companions of the unfortunate Dulcinea approached me from the side, without my seeing her, and with her eyes full of tears and in a low, troubled voice, she said to me, "My lady Dulcinea of Toboso kisses the hand of your grace, and implores your grace to let her know how you are, and, because she is in great need, she also entreats your grace most earnestly to be so kind as to lend her, accepting as security this new cotton underskirt that I have here, 6 reales, or whatever amount your grace may have, and she gives her word to return them to you very soon. Red Talus, it's good to see you." "Oh no, Star, take care. Go hide. No windows. Take care." I was astounded and amazed at this message, and turning to Señor Montesinos, I said, "Is it possible, Señor Montesinos, that distinguished persons who are enchanted suffer from need?" To which he responded, "Your grace can believe me, Señor Don Quixote of La Mancha, that what is called need is found everywhere, and extends to all places, and reaches everyone, and does not excuse even those who are enchanted. And since Señora Dulcinea of Toboso has sent someone to ask you for 6 reales, and the pledge is good, it seems, then you must give them to her, for she undoubtedly is in very great difficulty." "Her security I shall not take," I responded, "nor shall I give her what she asks, because I have no more than 4 reales. I gave these to her. They were the ones that you, Sancho, gave me the other day, so that I could give alms to the poor, whom I met along the road. And I said, 'My friend, tell your mistress that her troubles grieve my heart, and that I should like to be a foucar, so that I could solve them, and that I want her to know that I cannot and should not enjoy good health as long as I lack the pleasing sight of her and her discerning conversation, and I entreat her grace, as earnestly as I can, that she should be so kind as to allow herself to be seen and spoken to by this her captive servant and wandering knight.'" And there is a note after foucar, and it says, "This is the Spanish version of the name Fugger." Hold on, I'm gonna put this in chat. This, I've never seen this before. Fugger, the well-known German family of bankers and merchants who were closely associated with Spain. Oh, thank you for telling me that. "Tell her, too, that when she least expects it, she will hear that I have made a vow and taken an oath, in the manner of the one taken by the Marquis of Mantua, to avenge the nephew Baldovinos, when he found him near death in the heart of the mountains, which was not to eat bread at a cloth-covered table, along with the other trifles he mentioned here, until he had avenged him, and I shall do the same and vow not to rest, and to wander the 7 regions of the world more diligently than Don Pedro of Portugal, until I break her enchantment. There are 2 notes. First one is after Heart of the Mountain, and it says, the episode was mentioned in chapter 5 of the first part, so if you don't remember, sorry. And then the second note is after Don Pedro of Portugal, and it says, in allusion to the many travels of Pedro of Portugal, there is a traditional tendency to say that he traveled to the 7 partidas, of the world, rather than the more usual 4 corners, perhaps through confusion of the siete partidas, the treatise on law compiled by Alfonso the Learned from 1221 to 1284, King of Castilla and Leon. The more you know. Mm-hmm. Fugger's gonna fug, you know? All this and more, your grace owes to my lady, responded the maiden. And after taking the 4 reales, instead of curtsying, she gave a leap and jump 2 varas into the air. There's a note after varas, and it says, a vara in Spanish linear measurement. A vara is a Spanish linear measurement, and it's about 0.84 of a meter. Holy God, shouted Sancho. Is it possible that there are in the world enchanters and enchantments so strong that they have turned my master's good sense into foolishness and madness? Oh, senor, for God's sake, think about what you are doing and take back your honor, and don't believe this nonsense that has reduced and lessened your good sense. Since you love me, Sancho, you speak in this fashion, said Don Quixote. And since you have little experience in the things of this world, all things that are in any way difficult seem impossible to you. But in the course of time, as I have already said, I shall recount to you some of what I have seen down there, which will make you believe what I have recounted here, whose truth admits neither argument nor dispute. End of chapter 23. All right, so they lower Don Quixote into this cave. They leave him for 30 minutes and then pull him back up. And now he has this whole story. He apparently stayed there for 3 days and talking to a bunch of people. And he saw Lady Dulcinea of Toboso there. And yeah. And this is like one of the few times when Sancho knows that he is like not actually enchanted, because he made up the story about Dulcinea being enchanted and being that peasant girl and why she looked like a peasant girl, because that wasn't her. It was just somebody who just happened to be walking in the street at the time that Sancho was there. So it's so interesting the times when Sancho like knows that Don Quixote is just like doing his thing and just being Don Quixote, and then the other times when he's like fully wrapped up in whatever Don Quixote is saying and just like, oh yeah, that's totally true. I'm totally gonna be the governor of an insula and I'm gonna be super rich after all these adventures. Oh, Sancho. Oh, Sancho. And I'm curious to see if we get like a perspective from the cousin, because this cousin isn't like related to Don Quixote and hasn't been, like traveling along or even like being super involved in either Sancho or Don Quixote. So I'm curious to see like if the cousin is going to say something like at the end of all of this and what the perspective is. I started reading without taking a sip. Terrible. Who do I think I am? was like giving intense eye contact too. Calm yourself. I did not mean to be so aggressive. It is. It totally is a library slip. Yeah. I love all of my library and like bookish mugs. They're all so cute. I love them. All right. Chapter 24, in which 1,000 trifles are recounted as irrelevant as they are necessary to a true understanding of this great history. All right. Let's see what else Don Quixote has to say. The man who translated this great history from the original composed by its first author, Cid Hamete Benengeli, says that when he reached the chapter concerning the adventure of the cave of Montesinos, he found in the margin, written in Hamate's own hand, these precise words: I cannot believe, nor can I persuade myself, that everything written in the preceding chapter actually happened in its entirety to the valiant Don Quixote. The reason is that all the adventures up to this point have been possible and plausible, but with regard to this one in the cave, I can find no way to consider it true, since it goes so far beyond the limits of reason. But it is not possible for me to think that Don Quixote, the truest and most noble knight of his day, would lie, for he would not tell a lie even if he were shot with arrows. Moreover, he recounted and told it in all its circumstances and details, and in short a time he would not fabricate so enormous a quantity of nonsense. If this adventure seems apocryphal, the fault is not mine, and so, without affirming either its falsity or its truth, I write it down. You, reader, since you are a discerning person, must judge it according to your own lights, for I must not and cannot do more. Yet it is considered true that at the time of Don Quixote's passing and death, he is said to have retracted it, saying he had invented it because he thought it was consonant and compatible with the adventures he had read in his histories. Nick, thank you so much for the sub. Thank you so much. Welcome in. Glad you were here. Thanks. And then he continues, saying, the cousin was astounded, both by Sancho Panza's boldness and his master's patience, and he assumed that his joy at seeing his lady Dulcinea of Toboso, even though she was enchanted, gave rise to the mildness of disposition he displayed then, for otherwise Sancho's words and phrases would have merited a beating. The cousin, who really thought Sancho had been insolent to his master, said, Señor Don Quixote of the Mancha, I consider the journey I have made with your grace very worthwhile, because I have derived 4 things from it. The first, having met your grace, which I consider a great joy. The second, having learned what is inside the cave of Montesinos, along with the mutations of Guadiana and the lakes of Ruidera, which will be of great use to me in the Spanish Ovid that I have in hand. The third, having realized the antiquity of cards which were in use during the time of the Emperor Charlemagne, as one can deduce from the words your grace says Durandarte said when, after that long period of time, when Montesinos was talking to him, he awoke and said, have patience, and shuffle the deck. Oh, very good. Yeah, snuggle in. I hope you get some good sleep tonight. And these words and manner of speaking he could not have learned while he was enchanted, but when he was not, in France, and at the time of the aforementioned Emperor Charlemagne. And this discovery is just right for another book that I am writing, which is a supplement to Virgilio Polidoro on the inventions of antiquity. I believe that in his book he did not remember to put in the invention of cards, which I shall now include, and it will be of great importance, particularly quoting an authority as serious and reliable as Señor Durandarte. The fourth is having learned the truth regarding the origins of the Guiana River, unknown to anyone until now. Your Grace is correct, said Don Quixote, but I should like to know, if God grants what you receive a license to print your books, which I doubt, to whom you intend to dedicate them. There are nobles and grandees in Spain to whom they can be dedicated, said the cousin. Not many, responded Don Quixote, and not because they are not worthy of dedications, but because they do not wish to accept them in order not to be obliged to provide the reward that the work and courtesy of the authors seem to deserve. I know a prince who can make up for all the others, and with so many advantages that I dared mention them, I might perhaps awaken envy in more than one generous bosom. But let us put this aside until a more suitable time, and find a place where we can spend the night. And there is a note after I know a prince, and it says, the Count of Lemos, to whom the second part of the novel is dedicated. There's so many bits that is very meta, and I love it. I love a good meta. Not far from here, responded the cousin, is a hermitage, where a hermit lives, and people say he once was a soldier, and he is reputed to be a good Christian, and very diligent, and charitable as well. Beside the hermitage is a small house that he built at his own expense, and all through it is little it can receive guests. Does this hermit have chickens, by any chance? Asked Sancho. There are few hermits who do not, responded Don Quixote, because the ones today who are not like those in the deserts of Egypt, who dressed in palm leaves and ate roots. And you should not think that because I speak well of earlier hermits, I speak ill of modern ones. I mean to say only that the penances of modern hermits are not as harsh and rigorous as the older ones, but all of them are still good, at least I judge them to be good. In the worst of circumstances, the hypocrite who pretends to be good does less harm than the public sinner. While they were conversing, they saw a man coming toward them, walking quickly and using a stick to prod a mule that was loaded down with lances and halberds. When he reached them, he greeted them and passed by. Don Quixote said, "Stop, my good man, for it seems you are traveling faster than that mule would like." "I can't stop, senor," the man responded, "because the weapons you see me carrying must be used tomorrow, and I can't possibly stop, and so go with God. But if you want to know why I'm carrying them, I plan to spend the night at an inn that's past the hermitage, and if you're traveling the same way, you'll find me there, and then I'll tell you some wonderful things, and so again, go with God." Oh, Nick, thank you so much for the follow. And he prodded his mule so much that Don Quixote did not have the opportunity to ask him what wonderful things he planned to tell them, and since he was rather curious, and was always filled with the desire to learn new things, he said that they should leave immediately, and go to spend the night at the inn, not stopping at the hermitage, where the cousin wanted them to stay. And so they mounted their animals, and all three followed the road that led directly to the inn, where they arrived shortly before nightfall. On the way, the cousin said to Don Quixote that they should stop at the hermitage for something to drink. As soon as Sancho Panza heard this, he turned his donkey toward the hermitage, and Don Quixote and the cousin did the same. But as Sancho's bad luck would have it, the hermit was not home, which is what they were told by the assistant hermit, whom they found in the hermitage. They asked for some good wine, and he responded that his master did not have any, but if they wanted some cheap wine, he would gladly give it to them. "If I had a thirst for water," responded Sancho, "there are wells along the road where I could quench it. Oh, wedding of Camacho! Oh, plenty of the house of Don Diego! I miss you so often." They left the hermitage and spurred their mounts on to the inn, and in a little while they came upon a boy who was walking, not very quickly, in front of them, and they soon overtook him. He was carrying a sword over his shoulder, and on it there was a bundle or pack, apparently of his clothes, which appeared to be breeches or pantaloons, and a short cape, and a shirt or two, because he was wearing a velvet doublet, with some glimmers of satin, and a shirt hanging on, and his hose was of silk, and his shoes square-toed, in the fashion of the court. He must have been 18 or 19 years old, with a joyful face and, it seemed, an agile body, and as he walked he sang seguidillas to relieve the tedium of the road. And there is a note after seguidillas, and it says, a variable Spanish poetic stanza of 4 or 7 lines, its verses alternating between 5 and 7 syllables. When they reached him, he had just finished singing one that the cousin committed to memory, and it is said that it said, I'm forced to go to war because I'm so poor. If I had money, believe me, I wouldn't leave. The first to speak to him was Don Quixote, who said, Your Grace travels very lightly, gallant señor. Where are you going? Let us know, if you care to tell us. To which the boy responded, My traveling so light is because of the heat and poverty, and I am going to war. Why poverty? Asked Don Quixote. The heat is enough of a reason. The heat is enough of a reason. Why are you also in poverty? I don't get it. Señor, replied the lad, in this bundle I'm carrying some velvet pantaloons, companions to this doublet. If I wear them out on the road, I won't be able to honor myself with them in the city, and I don't have the money to buy others. For this reason, and to cool myself, I'll travel this way until I reach the infantry companies that are no more than 12 leagues away, and there I'll enlist, and there will be plenty of wagons that I can ride until we reach the port of embarkation, which they say will be in Cartagena. And I'd rather have the king as my lord and master, and serve him in war, than some fool at court. And does your grace have a bonus, by chance? Asked the cousin. If I had served some grandee of Spain or some distinguished nobleman, the boy responded, I'd certainly have one, which is what you get when you serve good masters. You leave the servants' table and become an ensign or a captain, or get a good allowance. But I, sad to say, always served office-seekers and upstarts, whose income and revenue were so miserable and sparse that they spent half of it when they paid for the starch in a collar. It would be considered a miracle if a venturesome page were to have any kind of good fortune. Note to self, buy velvet pantaloons. I'm surprised you don't have them. Thought everybody did. Wow. And tell me, friend, on your life, asked Don Quixote, is it possible that during the years you served you haven't been able to obtain some livery? I was given 2 liveries, responded the page, but like somebody who leaves the church before he takes his vow, and they take away his habit and give him back his clothes, the master gave me back my own clothes when their business at court had finished, and they went home and took back the liveries they had given just for show. That is a noteworthy. Oh my gosh, okay. We're gonna hook down phonics this real quick. Spilorcera? Spilorceria, as they say in Italian, said Don Quixote. But even so, you should consider it good fortune to have left the court with such good intentions, because there is nothing on earth more honorable or beneficial than serving God, first of all, and then your king and natural lord, especially in the practice of arms, by means of which one achieves, is not more wealth, at least more honor, than through letters, as I have said often, Although letters have founded more estates than arms, those who pursue arms have, I do not know precisely what kind of advantage over those who pursue letters, but I do know what kind of splendor places them above all others. Thanks, Malcolm. That's totally how you spell it, or how you pronounce it. And of course, there is a note after it, and it says the word means miserliness or stinginess. And what I wish to tell you now, you should keep in your memory, for it will be of great benefit and consolation to you in your hardships. You must put out of your mind the adversities that may befall you, for the worst of them is death, and if it is a good death, then dying is the best thing that can happen to you. Julius Caesar, that valiant Roman emperor, was asked what was the best death, and he responded the one that was unexpected, sudden, and unforeseen. And although he responded as a heathen who did not have knowledge of the true God, yet he was correct in view of human feeling, for what does it matter if you are killed in the first battle or skirmish, or shot by artillery, or blown up by a mine? It is all dying, and the end of the story, and according to Terence, the soldier killed in battle looks better than the one who is safe and sound in flight, and the good soldier achieves as much fame as his obedience to his captains and to those who can command him. And remember, son, that the soldier prefers the smell of gunpowder to the scent of musk, and if old age overtakes you in this honorable profession, even if you are full of wounds and maimed or crippled, at least when it overtakes you, you will not be without honor, an honor that not even poverty can diminish. Furthermore, laws are now being enacted that will protect and assist old and crippled soldiers, because it is not right that they be entreated the way blacks are treated who are emancipated and freed when they are old and can no longer serve. What? And are thrown out of the house and called free men, making them slaves to hunger from which only death can liberate them. Oh, I see what he's trying to say. It's bad taste, but I see what he's trying to say. Um, and for now I do not wish to say more, except that you should ride behind me on my horse until we reach the inn, and there you will have supper with me, and in the morning you will continue on your way, and may God make it as smooth for you as your desires deserve. Page did not accept the invitation to ride behind, though he did say yes to eating supper with them in the inn. And at this moment it is said that Sancho said to himself, Lord, save my master. Is it possible that a man who knows how to say all the many good things that he's said here can say he's seen the impossible foolishness that he says he saw in the cave of Montesinos? Well now, time will tell. At this point, they reached the inn just as night was falling, and much to Sancho's delight, he saw that his master judged it to be a real inn, and not a castle, as he usually did. As soon as they had entered, Don Quixote asked the innkeeper about the man with the lances and halberds, and he responded that the man was in the stable tending to the mule. The cousin and Sancho did the same for their donkeys, giving Rocinante the best manger and stall in the stable. End of chapter 24. Oh, yeah, anytime Sancho speaks, it feels like really gossipy almost because his sentences are so long and lots of run-on sentences are happening, and the way he talks definitely is a mouthful. Absolutely. That's the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. Yes, Sancho is very stream of consciousness. That's a very good way to say it. Yeah, absolutely. He just says what comes into his mind. Punctuation be damned. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. When characters have very strongly distinguishable dialogue, it's so good because it gives you so much insight into who they are. And of course, it's props to, the author who's able to tap into both extremes in this case with Sancho and Don Quixote. And even like Don Quixote, like you can tell when he's like putting on that like knight-errant air because he has all of the like giveth and saith and thou doeth and like all of that versus like when he's talking to somebody who he sees as like his equal or who's below him, then he'll just like he just like has his regular talk where he just calls, Sancho an idiot or anything like that. Yeah, like it's such interesting character study. Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate it 1000%. All right. Oof. Chapter 25. I know I'm gonna immediately regret sitting like this, but here we are. Let's see how long this chapter is first. Let's see. I can sit like that for that long. Okay. Chapter 25, in which note is made of the braying adventure and the diverting adventure of the puppet master, along with the memorable divinations of the soothsaying monkey. Oh, what's my shirt say? Nanaki, hello, enjoy your lurk. It says, oh, you can't really read it. What's more punk than a public library? just saying. Don Quixote was on pins and needles, as the saying goes, until he could hear and learn about the marvels promised by the man carrying the weapons. He went to look for him in the place where the innkeeper had said he was, and found him, and said that the man had to tell him now what he would, in any case, tell him later regarding what Don Quixote had said on the road, to which the man responded, "The recounting of my marvels has to take place more slowly, and not while we're standing, Señor, your grace must allow me to tend to my animal, and then I shall tell you things that will astound you." Oh, Red Talus, thank you so much for the hydrate. Thank you. Always taking good care of me. And he did. Sifting the barley. Oh, excuse me, I skipped a line. Do not let that delay you, responded Don Quixote, for I shall help you with everything. And he did, sifting the barley for him and cleaning the manger, humble labors that obliged the man to tell him willingly what he said, what he had asked, and sitting down on a stone bench with Don Quixote beside him, and the cousin, the page, Sancho Panza, and the innkeeper as senate and audience, he began to speak in this manner. Your graces should know that in a town 4.5 leagues from this inn, a councilman lost a donkey through the deceitful efforts of one of his servant's girls. But that's a long story, and though the councilman made every effort to find the animal, he could not. According to what everyone says, the donkey had been missing for some 2 weeks when the councilman who had sustained the loss found himself in the square, and another councilman from the same town said to him, "You owe me a reward, compadre. Your donkey has turned up." "I promise you'll get it, compadre," he responded. "But where did he turn up?" "In the woods," responded the finder. "I saw him this morning without a pack saddle or any trappings, and so skinny it made me feel bad just to look at him. I tried to catch him and bring him back to you, but he's so wild and untamed now that when I went up to him, he ran off into the deepest part of the woods. If you want both of us to look for him, just let me take my little Jenny home, and I'll be right back." "I appreciate that," said the one who had lost the donkey, and I'll try to return the favor. Everybody who knows the truth of the matter tells the story with the same details, and in the same manner that I'm telling it now. In short, the two councilmen together went on foot into the woods, and they reached the place and the site where they thought they would find the donkey, but did not find him there, or anywhere nearby, no matter how much they searched. Seeing that he was nowhere to be found, the one who had seen the donkey said to the other councilman, "Look, compadre, I've just had an idea, and there's no doubt that with it we'll be able to find this animal even if he's hiding in the bowels of the earth, let alone the woods. The fact that I know how to bray wonderfully well, and if you know how even a little, then the matter's settled." "Did you say even a little, compadre?" asked the other councilman. "By God, nobody's better than me, not even the donkeys." "We'll see," said the second councilman, "because I've decided that you should go to one part of the woods, and I'll go to the other, so that we'll walk all around it, and every few steps you'll bray, and I'll bray, and the donkey will have to hear us, and respond if he's in the woods at all." To which the owner of the donkey responded, "Compadre, I say it's an excellent plan, and worthy of your great intelligence." This plan, I see no fault. And separating as they had agreed, it so happened that they both brayed almost at the same time, and each was deceived by the braying of the other and came running, thinking the donkey had returned. And when they saw each other, the one who had lost the donkey said, "Is it possible, compadre, that it wasn't my donkey who brayed?" "No, it was me," responded the man. I sound more like a donkey than a donkey, so weird flex, but okay. "Then I say, compadre," said the owner, "that between you and a jackass there's no difference at all as far as braying is concerned, because never in my life have I seen or heard anything more likable or more lifelike." "The compliments and flattery," responded the planner, "belong and apply to you more than me, compadre. For the God who made me, you can give a two-bray advantage to the greatest and most expert brayer in the world, because your sound is loud, your voice sustained, and the correct time and rhythm, your inflections numerous and rapid. In short, I admit defeat and surrender the palm, and hand you the banner of for this rare ability." "Now I say," responded the owner, "that from now on I'll esteem myself more and think better of myself, and believe that I know something valuable since I'm graced with this talent. Though I thought I could bray well, I never realized I had reached the heights that you say I have." "I'll also say now," responded the second man, "that there are rare abilities in the world that are lost, and ill used by those who don't know how to take advantage of them." "Except in cases such as the one we're dealing with now," responded the owner, "ours are of little use to us, and even here, may it praise God, that they do us some good." Having said this, they separated, and returned to their braying, and were constantly being deceived, and came back together again, until they decided on a signal to let them know that they were the ones braying, and not the donkey, and it was that they would bray twice, one bray right after the other. In this way, constantly giving two brays in a row, they circled the entire woods. But the lost donkey did not respond, not even with a sign. Yet, how could the poor unfortunate respond? For they found him in the deepest part of the woods, devoured by wolves. And when they saw him, the owner said, "I was surprised at his not responding, because if he hadn't been dead, he would have brayed when he heard us, or wouldn't be a donkey. But as long as I was able to hear you bray so beautifully, compadre, I consider the effort of looking for him well worth the trouble. even though I found him dead. R.I.P. Donkey, I know. We're a talented pair, compadre, responded the other, because if the abbot sings well, the altar boy's not far behind. And so, disconsolate and hoarse, they returned to their village and told their friends, neighbors, and acquaintances what had happened to them in their search for the donkey, each exaggerating the other's talent for braying, all of which was learned and circulated in nearby towns. And the devil, who never sleeps, and loves to sow and plant quarrels and discord wherever he goes, spreading mischief on the wind and creating disputes out of nothing, ordered and arranged matters so that the people from other towns, when they saw someone from our village, would bray, as if throwing the braying of our councilmen back into our faces. The boys joined in, which was like giving it into the hands and mouths of all the demons in hell, and the braying spread from one town to another, so that the natives of a town are known by their braying, just as blacks are known and differentiated from whites, and this unfortunate mockery has gone so far that often the mocked, holding weapons in their hands and marching in formation, have come out to do battle with the mockers, and no one said nothing. Neither fear nor shame can stop it. I believe that tomorrow or the next day the people from my village, who are the people who bray, will go to fight another town that's 2 leagues away, which is one of those that persecute us the most, and so that they can be well prepared, I've bought the lances and halberts that you saw, and these are the marvels I said I would tell you, and if they don't seem so to you, I don't know any others. I know. Oh, old books. You can be so great, and then unexpectedly just sprinkling in some casual racism. Doesn't need to be like that. No. Don't punch down. Don't punch, equal, punch up. Come on. Come on. In saying this, the good man concluded what he had to say, and at that moment a man dressed all chamois, hose, breeches, and doublet, came through the door of the inn, and in a loud voice he said, "Señor innkeeper, is there a room at the inn? For the soothsaying monkey is coming here, and a puppet show about the freeing of Melisendra." "Good Lord," said the innkeeper, "it's Master Pedro. There's a good night ahead of us." I forgot to say that this Master Pedro had his left eye and almost half his cheek covered with a patch of green taffeta, a sign that all of that side was probably diseased. The innkeeper continued, saying, "Your Grace is welcome, Señor Master Pedro. Where are the monkey and the puppet stage? I don't see them." "They're nearby," responded the man, "but I came on ahead to find out if there's room." I'd move out the Duke of Alba himself to make room for Master Pedro," responded the innkeeper. "Bring the monkey and the puppet stage in, because tonight there are people in the inn who will pay to see the show and the monkey's talent." I absolutely said soothsaying monkey. Yes. Not words that you would think you would ever say or hear. But there they are. "That's a stroke of luck," responded the man with the patch. "I'll lower the price and consider myself well paid if I cover my costs. Now I'll go and bring in the cart that's carrying the monkey and the stage." And then he left the inn again. Don Quixote asked the innkeeper about Master Pedro and the puppet show, and the monkey he was bringing with him, to which the innkeeper responded, "He's a famous puppet master who's been traveling the Aragonese side of La Mancha for some time, showing a puppet play about Melisendra being freed by the famous Don Gaiferos, which is one of the best acted history seen in this part of the kingdom for many years. He also has with him a monkey with the rarest talent ever seen among monkeys or imagined among men, because if he's asked something, he pays attention to what he's asked, then jumps onto his master's shoulders and goes up to his ear and tells him the answer to the question, and then Master Pedro says what it is. He has much more to say about past things than about future ones, and even though he isn't right all the time, he's not wrong most of the time. So he makes us think he has the devil in his body. He charges 2 reales for each question if the monkey responds. If the master responds for him after he's spoken into his ear. People believe that Master Pedro is very rich, a uomo galante, and a bon compagno, as they say in Italy, who leads the best life in the world. He talks more than 6 men and drinks more than 12, all paid for by his tongue and his monkey and his puppet show. At this point, Master Pedro returned, and in a cart came the puppet stage, and a large, tailless monkey with a rump like felt, but a face that was nice looking. And as soon as Don Quixote saw him, he asked, "Señor Soothsayer, can your grace tell me, che pese pigliamo? What will become of us? And here you can see my 2 reales." There's a note after che pese pigliamo, and it says, this phrase, literally, what fish are we catching, or what are we up to, what are we doing, and others like it, as well as the Italian words spoken by the innkeeper, were introduced into Spain by soldiers returning from Italy. There you go. Now we know why there's a smattering, if you will, of Italian in this book. At this point, Master Pedro returned. Oh, he already returned. Excuse me. There we are. And he told Sancho to hand them to Master Pedro, who responded for the monkey, saying, "Señor, this animal does not respond or give information about things to come. About past things he knows a little, and about present ones a little more." "By God," said Sancho, "I wouldn't pay anything to have somebody tell me what's already happened to me. Who knows that better than me? And it would be foolish to pay anybody to tell me what I already know. But since he knows about present things, here's my 2 reales, so his monkeyness can tell me what my wife, Teresa Panza, is doing now, and how she's spending her time." Master Pedro refused to take the money. My gosh, he refused to take the money, saying, "I don't wish to receive payment ahead of time, before the service has been provided." And he hit his left shoulder twice with his right hand, and the monkey leaped onto it, put his mouth to his ear, clicked his teeth together very quickly, and after doing this for the length of time it takes to say a credo, gave another leap down to the floor, and when he did this, Master Pedro rushed to kneel in front of Don Quixote, and throwing his arms around his legs, he said, "I embrace these legs as I would embrace the 2 pillars of Hercules, O illustrious reviver of a now forgotten knight-errantry, O never sufficiently praised knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, courage of the faint-hearted, support of those about to fall, strong arm of those who have fallen, comfort and consolation of all who are unfortunate." Don Quixote was dumbfounded, Sancho astonished, the cousin baffled, the page stunned, the man who told about the braying stupefied, the innkeeper perplexed, and, in short, all who heard the words of the puppet master, were amazed. But he continued, saying, "And you, O worthy Sancho Panza, the best squire of the best knight in the world, be of good cheer. Your good wife Teresa is well, and at this very moment she is carding a pound of flax. To be more specific, on her left is a broken-mouthed jug that holds a good measure of wine, and with it she keeps her spirits as she works. I can believe that, responded Sancho, because she's a wonderful woman, and except for her being jealous, I wouldn't trade her for the giantess, excuse me, and Adana, and who, according to my master, was a very honorable and upright woman. My Teresa is one of those women who won't let themselves fare badly, even at the expense of their heirs. And there is a note after Andadana, and it says a character in the novel Amadis of Gaul. No, I say, said Don Quixote at this point, that the man who reads a good deal and travels a good deal, sees a good deal and knows a good deal. I say this because what argument would have been enough to persuade me that there are monkeys in the world who can soothsay, as I have just seen with my own eyes? Because I am the very same Don Quixote of La Mancha mentioned by this good animal, although he has gone a little too far in praising me, but no matter. I give thanks to heaven, who granted me a gentle and compassionate spirit, always inclined to do good to everyone, and evil to none. If I had money, said the page, I'd ask this noble monkey what will happen to me on the travels I'm undertaking. To which Master Pedro, who by this time had risen to the feet of Don Quixote, responded, I've already said that this beast does not speak of the future, but if he did, not having money wouldn't matter, because for the sake of serving Señor Don Quixote, here present, I would give up all the profits in the world. And now, because I owe it to him, and to give him pleasure, I would like to set up my puppet stage and delight everyone in the inn, at no charge whatsoever. Okay, I am suspicious. I feel like Master Pedro knows Don Quixote, not because Don Quixote is a knight-errant, but knows him, like, from the village, and maybe, like, the priest and the barber and all of them are trying to have a scheme to bring Don Quixote back to the village again, and, like, are doing so through Master Pedro. I don't know. I guess Master Pedro also could have, like, read the book about him and about their adventures, so I guess we should just keep reading. When he heard this, the innkeeper, who was overjoyed, indicated the spot where the stage could be placed, and this was done in very short order. Don Quixote was not very pleased with the monkey's soothsaying, for it did not seem right that a monkey could divine things, whether things of the future or of the past. And so while Master Pedro was arranging the stage, Don Quixote withdrew with Sancho to a corner of the stable where no one could hear them, and he said, Look, Sancho, I have considered very carefully the strange talent of this monkey, and in my opinion this Master Pedro, his owner, must have made a pact, either illicit or explicit, with the devil. If the pack's split and belongs to the devil, said Sancho, it must be very dirty pack, no doubt about it. But what good would that do Master Pedro? You do not understand me, Sancho. I mean only that he must have made some agreement with the devil to grant this talent to the monkey, so that Master Pedro could earn his living. And when he is rich, the devil will take his soul, which is precisely what the universal enemy wishes. And what makes me believe this is seeing that the monkey replies only to past or present things, which is as far as the devil's knowledge can go. Further things cannot be known except through conjecture, and only occasionally. For knowing all times and moments is reserved to God alone, and for him there is no past or future. Everything is present. And this being true, as it is clear that this monkey speaks in the style of the devil, and I am amazed that he has not been denounced to the Holy Office, and examined, and forced to tell by whose power he divines, for it is also clear that this monkey is not an astrologer, and neither he nor his master casts, or knows how to cast, the astrological charts used so widely now in Spain that there's not a fishwife, page, or old cobbler who does not presume to cast a chart, as if it were the knave in a pack of cards lying on the floor, corrupting the marvelous truths of science with their lies and ignorance. I know of a lady who asked one of them if a small lapdog she had would become pregnant and give birth, and how many pups she would have, and what color they would be, to which our noble astrologer responded that the dog would become pregnant and give birth to 3 pups, one green, one red, and one spotted, provided that the dog was mounted between 11 and 12 in the morning, or at night, and that it took place on a Monday or a Saturday. And what happened was that 2 days later the little dog died of indigestion, and the noble prognosticator was credited in the town with being a very accurate casterer of charts, a reputation that all or most astrologers have. Even so, said Sancho, I would like your grace to tell Master Pedro to ask his monkey if what happened to your grace in the cave of Montesinos is true. In my opinion, begging your grace's pardon, it was all deceptions and lies, or at least nothing but dreams. Everything is possible, responded Don Quixote, but I shall do as you advise, although I still have certain scruples in that regard. As they were speaking, Master Pedro came forward for Don Quixote to tell him that the puppet stage was ready, and that his grace would come to see it because it was worthwhile. Don Quixote told him what he was thinking and implored him to first ask his monkey to tell him if certain things that had occurred in the cave of Montesinos were dreamed or true, because it seemed to him that they were both, to which Master Pedro, without saying a word, brought back his monkey, and standing in front of Don Quixote and Sancho, he said, "Look, noble monkey, this knight wishes to know if certain things that happened to him in a cave called Montesinos were false or true." And after his master had made the usual signal, the monkey jumped onto his left shoulder and spoke to him, apparently, in his ear, and then Master Pedro said, "The monkey says that some of the things your grace saw, or experienced, in the aforesaid cave are false, and some are true. And this is all he knows, nothing more, with regard to this question, and if your grace should wish to know more, next Friday he will respond to everything you ask of him, but for the moment he has used up his abilities, and they won't return until Friday, as he said." "Didn't I say," said Sancho, "that I couldn't believe, señor, that everything your grace said about what happened in the cave was true? Not even half?" "Events will tell the truth of things, Sancho," responded Don Quixote. "For time, which reveals all things, brings everything into the light of day, even if it is hidden in the bowels of the earth. Enough of that for now. Let us go to see the puppet show of our good Master Pedro, for I believe it must hold some surprises." "What do you mean, some?" responded Master Pedro. 60,000 are contained in this show of mine. I tell your grace, Señor Don Quixote, that if it is one of the most spectacular things in the world today, but a pluribus credete et non verbis. And now to work, for it is getting late, and we have much to do and say and show. And there is a note, and it says, the phrase is based on John 10:38. "Though ye believe not me, believe the works." Don Quixote and Sancho did as he asked, and went to the place where the stage was set up for all to see, and it was filled with the light of little wax candles that made it look colorful and resplendent. As soon as they arrived, Master Pedro went inside the puppet theater, for it was he who would manipulate the figures in the play, and outside stood a boy, a servant of Master Pedro's, to act as interpreter and narrator of the mysteries on stage. In his hand he held a rod with which he pointed to the figures as they came out. When everyone in the inn was sitting, and some standing, in front of the stage, and Don Quixote, Sancho, the page, and the cousin were settled into the best places, the interpreter began to say what will be heard and seen by those who hear or see the following chapter. That is the end of chapter 25. Hey Stevie, good to see you. All right, so chapter 24. They come to an inn. They hear the weird story of the town who's just known for their braying like donkeys. Which just seems so bizarre. Um, and then there is Master Pedro who comes and he has a soothsayer monkey who can only talk about the past and the present. And he also does a puppet show. And so he comes in and Don Quixote asks him a question about the future. And the monkey is like, dude, I can't answer you. Can't do it. Well, the monkey didn't say that. Master Pedro said that. And so then Sancho Panza asks a question about his wife. Like, all right, well, what is my wife doing right this moment? And then so, like, the monkey hops up, whispers in Master Pedro's ear, and then Master Pedro is like, oh my god, it's Don Quixote of La Mancha. Everyone listen up, he's amazing, and Sancho Panza, good god. And then like says that his wife is like doing work. um and so Sancho is like, all right, well, now is your chance to ask if what happened in the cave, what you saw or what you related to us, is true. And Sancho, and the monkey like whispers in Master Pedro's ear, and Master Pedro is like, some things happened, some things didn't. We can't give you more information until next Friday. Used up the ability, sorry. Check back next Friday. Camel Dip, hello. Welcome in. Thank you so much for the follow. And so now they're gonna watch a puppet show, which is about to happen in the next chapter. This is so wild, so wild. All right, chapter 26. Exactly. Cannot predict like right now. The magic 8-ball monkey. Chapter 26, in which the diverting adventure of the puppet master continues, along with other things that are really very worthwhile. All fell silent, both Tyrians and Trojans. Immediately a note, and it says, the line is taken from the Spanish translation of Aeneid by Gregorio Hernandez de Velasco, 1555. I mean to say, all those looking at the stage were waiting to hear the words of the narrator regarding its marvels, when the sound of a large number of drums and trumpets was heard, and a good deal of artillery firing. Then the sound soon ended, and the boy raised his voice and said, this true history, presented here for your graces, is taken literally from the French chronicles and Spanish ballads which are in the mouths of everyone, even children, on our streets. It tells of how Señor Don Gaiferos freed his wife, Melisendra, who was held captive in Spain by the Moors in the city of Sansueña, which was the name given in those days to the city of Zaragoza, and your grace can see here how Don Gaiferos is playing backgammon, as they sing in the song, Don Gaiferos is playing at backgammon, his lady Melisendra is forgotten. And there are two notes. The first one is after the city of Zaragoza, and it's a long note. Here we go. The characters and story are taken from Spanish ballads. Gaiferos, Charlemagne's nephew, was about to marry Charlemagne's daughter, Melisendra, when she was captured by Moors. For some reason, Gaiferos spends 7 years in Paris, not thinking of her, until Charlemagne persuades him to free her. Roland lends him weapons and a horse. Gaiferos reaches Sansueña, where Melisendra is being held by King Almanzor, and sees her at a window. He rescues her, and they flee, pursued so closely by the Moors that Gaiferos has to dismount and do battle with him. He is victorious, and he and Melisendra return to Paris in triumph. And then the next note is after that. That song's a real banger. The next note is after the song, and it says, these verses are from a poem on the subject by Miguel Sanchez. And the personage who appears now with a crown on his head and a scepter in his hand is the Emperor Charlemagne, the supposed father of Melisendra, and he, angry at seeing the idleness and neglect of his son-in-law, comes to reprimand him. Notice how earnestly and heatedly he reprimands him, as if he wanted to hit him 6 times on the head with his scepter. And there are even authors who say that he did hit him, and hit him hard. And after saying many things to him about the danger to his honor because he would not obtain the liberty of his wife, they say that he said to him, "I have said enough. Look to it." There's a note after that quote, and it says, the line is from one of the ballads about Gaiferos. And look, your graces, at how the emperor turns his back and leaves an indignant Don Gaiferos. Now see how he, made impatient by anger, tosses away the backgammon board in pieces and quickly asks for his armor, and asks his cousin, Don Roland, for the loan of his sword, Durindana, and see how Don Roland does not want to lend it to him, offering instead to accompany him in the difficult enterprise he is undertaking. But the angry and valiant knight does not accept, saying that alone he is enough to rescue his wife, even if she is held at the very center of the earth. And now he goes in to put on his armor so that he can set out immediately. Your graces, turn your eyes to the tower that you see there. It is one of the towers of Zaragoza's castle fortress, now called La Aljaferia. Jaferia. It's called something that starts with an A and ends in an A. And that lady you see on the balcony, dressed in the Moorish fashion, is the peerless Melisendra, who would often stand there and look at the road to France and turn her thoughts to Paris and her husband, finding consolation in her captivity. Look, too, at what is happening now, perhaps unlike anything you have ever seen before. Don't you see that Moor stealing up behind Melisendra on tiptoe, his finger to his lips? Well, look at how he kisses her right on the mouth, and how quickly she spits and wipes her mouth with the white sleeve of her dress, and how she laments, and in her grief tears at her beautiful hair, as if it were to blame for the offense. Look too at that somber Moor in the passageway, King Marsilio of Sansueña, who saw the insolence of the other Moor, had him arrested, though he was a relative and a great favorite, and ordered him to be given 200 lashes, and to be taken through the usual streets of the city, with town criers walking before, and armed bailiffs coming behind. And see here where they are coming to carry out the sentence so soon after the crime was committed, because the Moors don't have the indictment of the accused and remanded to custody that we do. There's a note after, with town criers walking before and armed bailiffs coming behind. And it says the lines were taken from a ballad by Francisco de Quevedo, 1580 to 1645, one of the most brilliant literary figures of the Spanish Golden Age. "Boy, boy," said Don Quixote in a loud voice, "tell your story in a straight line, and do not become involved in curves or transverse lines. For to get a clear idea of the truth, one must have proofs, and more proofs." I love that they're watching a puppet show, and Don Quixote is like, excuse me, can you please tell a linear story? Thank you. That would be great." And from the interior, Master Pedro also said, "Boy, tend to your business and do what that gentleman says. That's the right thing to do. Go on with your plain song, and don't get involved in counterpoints that really break because you're so confined." "I will," responded the boy, and he continued, saying, "This figure, who appears here on horseback, wrapped in a Gascony cape, is Don Gaiferos himself, and see his wife, who has been avenged for the insolence of the enamoured Moor, looking better and more tranquil as she stands at the window of the tower and talks to her husband, thinking he is a passer-by, and saying to him all those words and phrases in the ballads that say, 'Señor Knight, if you are bound for France, then ask after Don Gaiferos.' I won't recite them now, because going on too long gives rise to boredom. It's enough to see how Don Gaiferos reveals his identity, and through her joyful gestures Melisendra lets us know that she has recognized him, and now we see her letting herself down from the balcony in order to sit on the hindquarters of her good husband's horse. But oh, what misfortune! The lace of her skirt has caught on some of the wrought iron at the balcony, and she hangs in mid-air and cannot reach the ground. But see how merciful Heaven sends help at the moment of greatest need, for here comes Don Gaiferos, and not worrying about tearing the rich skirt, he grasps her and simply pulls her down to the ground, and then in a heap he sets her on his horse's hindquarters, astride like a man, and tells her to hold on tight, and places her arm over his shoulders and crosses them on his chest so that she doesn't fall, since Señora Melisendra was not accustomed to this kind of riding. See, too, how the neighing of the horse shows that he is content to be carrying the valiant and beautiful burden of his lord and lady. See how they turn their backs and leave the city, and with joy and delight take the road to Paris. Go in peace, O peerless pair of true lovers. May you arrive safely in your own dear country, and may fortune place no obstacles in the way of your happy journey. May the eyes of your friends and relations see you enjoy your days in peace and tranquillity, and may those granted you in this life be as many as those of Nestor." There's a note after Nestor, and it says, "A character in the Iliad who was extremely old." Thank you. At this point, Master Pedro once again raised his voice, saying, "Simplicity, boy, don't be arrogant. All affectation is bad." The interpreter said nothing in reply, but went on, saying, "There is no lack of curious eyes, the kind that tend to see everything, to see Melisendra descend from the balcony and mount the horse, and they informed King Marsilio, who immediately gave orders to sound the call to arms, and see how soon this is done, and how the city is flooded with the sound of the bells that ring from all the towers of the mosques." "No, that is wrong," said Don Quixote. "Master Pedro is incorrect in the matter of the bells, for the Moors do not use bells, but drums and a kind of flute that resemble our flageolet, and there is no doubt that ringing bell in Sansueña is a great piece of nonsense." This was heard by Master Pedro, who stopped the ringing and said, Your grace should not concern yourself here with trifles, Senor Don Quixote, or try to carry things as far as you never reach the end of them. Aren't 1,000 plays performed almost every day that are full of 1,000 errors and pieces of nonsense, and yet are successful productions that are greeted not only with applause, but with admiration? Go on, boy, and let them say what they will, for as long as I fill my purse, there can be no more errors than atoms in the sun. He is the worst audience. Such a heckler. Such a heckler. I would be so embarrassed if I was with Don Quixote and he was like shouting at people during a show. I would be so embarrassed. Just so embarrassed to be with him. Ooh. That is true, replied Don Quixote. And the boy said, look at the number of brilliant horsemen riding out the city in pursuit of the two Catholic lovers. Look at how many trumpets blare, how many flutes play, how many drums and tambours sound. I'm afraid they will overtake them and bring them back, tied to the tail of their own horse, which would be an awful sight. And Don Quixote, seeing and hearing so many Moors and so much clamor, thought it would be a good idea to assist those who were fleeing, and rising to his feet, in a loud voice, he said, I shall not consent, in my lifetime, in my presence, to any such offence against an enamoured knight so famous and bold as Don Gaiferos. Halt, you low-born rabble, do not follow, and do not pursue him, unless you wish to do battle with me. And speaking and taking action, he unsheathed his sword, leaped next to the stage, and with swift and never before seen fury began to rain down blows on the crowd of Moorish puppets, knocking down some, beheading others, ruining this one, destroying that one, and among many other blows, he delivered so powerful a downstroke that if Master Pedro had not stopped, crouched down, and hunched over, he would have cut off his head more easily than if it had been so much marzipan. Master Pedro cried out, saying, Your Grace must stop, Senor Don Quixote, and realize that the ones you are overthrowing, destroying, and killing are not Moors, but only pasteboard figures. Sinner that I am, you are destroying and ruining everything that I own. But this did not keep Don Quixote from raining down slashes, two-handed blows, thrusts, and backstrokes. In short, in less time than it takes to tell about it, he knocked the puppet theater to the floor, all its scenery and figures cut and broken to pieces. King Marsilio was badly wounded, and Emperor Charlemagne's head and crown were split in two. The audience of spectators was in a tumult. The monkey ran out of the window and onto the roof. The cousin was fearful. The page was frightened. And even Sancho Panza was terrified because, as he swore when the storm was over, he had never seen his master in so wild a fury. When the general destruction of the puppet theater was complete, Don Quixote calmed down somewhat and said, At this moment, I should like to have here, in front of me, all those who do not believe and do not wish to believe how much good knights-errant do in the world. If I had not been here, just think what would have happened to the worthy Don Gaiferos and the beautiful Melisendra. Most certainly, by this time, those dogs would have overtaken them and committed some outrage against them. In brief, long live knight-errantry, over and above everything in the world today. Long live, and good fortune, said Master Pedro in a faint voice, and nothing but death for me, for I am so unfortunate, and I can say with Don Rodrigo, yesterday the lord of all Spain, today not even a tower that I can call my own. And there is a note right after that, and it says, These lines are from one of the many ballads that deal with Don Rodrigo, the last Visigothic knight, or king, of Spain who lost the country to the Moors. Not half an hour ago, not even half a moment, I was the master of kings and emperors, my stables and coffers and sacks filled with infinite horses and countless treasures, and now I am desolate and dejected, impoverished, and a beggar, and worst of all, without my monkey, and by my faith, it will be like pulling teeth to get him back again, and all because of the ill-considered rage of this knight, who, they say, protects orphans and rights wrongs and does other charitable works, and in me alone have his generous intention come to naught. Praise be to blessed heaven, where the seats are sublime. In short, the Knight of the Sorrowful Face has certainly brought sorrow to my figures and puppets. Sancho Panza was deeply affected by the words of Master Pedro, and he said, "Don't cry, Master Pedro, and don't wail, or you'll break my heart. And let me tell you that my master, Don Quixote, is so Catholic and so scrupulous a Christian that if he realizes he's done you harm, he'll tell you so, and want to pay and satisfy you, and with interest. If Señor Don Quixote would pay me even in part for the figures he has destroyed, I would be happy, and his grace would satisfy his conscience, because there is no salvation for the man who holds another's property against the will of the owner and does not return it." "That is true," said Don Quixote, "but until now I did not know what I had anything of yours, Master Pedro." "What do you mean?" responded Master Pedro. "These relics lying on the hard and sterile ground, what scattered and annihilated them but the invincible strength of that mighty arm, and whose bodies were they but mine? And how did I earn my living except with them?" "Now I believe," said Don Quixote at this point, what I have believed on many other occasions. The enchanters who pursue me simply place figures as they really are before my eyes, and then change and alter them into whatever they wish. I tell you really and truly, you gentlemen who can hear me, it seemed to me that everything that happened here was actually happening, that Melisendra was Melisendra, Don Gaiferos Don Gaiferos, Marsilio Marsilio, and Charlemagne Charlemagne. For that reason I was overcome by rage, and to fulfill the obligations of the knight-errantry I profess, I wanted to give my help and favor to those who are fleeing, and to this worthy end I did what you have seen. If matters have turned out otherwise, the fault is not mine, but lies with the wicked creatures who pursue me. Even so, although my error was not the result of malice, I wish to sentence myself to pay the costs. Let Master Pedro decide what he wants for the damaged puppets, for I offer to pay him immediately in good, standard Castilian coin." Master Pedro bowed, saying, "I expected no less from the extraordinary Christianity of the valiant Don Quixote of La Mancha, a true shelter and protection for all needy and impoverished wanderers. In this the noble innkeeper and the great Sancho will be mediators between your grace and me, and assessors of what the demolished figures are worth, or might have been worth." The innkeeper and Sancho agreed, and then Master Pedro picked up from the floor King Marsilio of Zaragoza, who was missing the head, and said, "You can see how impossible it is to return this king to his original state, and so it seems to me, unless you think otherwise, that for his death, end, and termination, I would be given 4.5 reales. "Continue," said Don Quixote. "Well, for this slash that goes from top to bottom," continued Master Pedro, picking up the 2 halves of Emperor Charlemagne, "it would not be too much if I asked for 5.25 reales. "That's no small amount," said Sancho. "Not a large one, either," replied the innkeeper. "Let's settle at 5 reales. "Give him the entire 5.25, said Don Quixote. For a quarter more or less will not change this notable misfortune in any way. Finish quickly, Master Pedro, because it is almost time for supper, and I am feeling somewhat hungry." "For this figure," said Master Pedro, the beautiful Melisendra, who is missing a nose and one eye. I want, and I think it's fair, 2 reales and 12 maravedis. It would certainly be the devil's work, said Don Quixote, if Melisendra and her husband were not already at the French border, at the very least, because the horse they were riding seemed to me to be flying rather than running, and so there is no reason to try to swindle me, showing me a Melisendra without a nose when the other one is at leisure and making merry in France with her husband. May God help each man with his own affairs, Señor Master Pedro, and let all of us proceed in a straightforward way and with honest intentions. Continue. Master Pedro, who saw that Don Quixote was slipping back into madness and returning to his earlier theme, did not want him to get away, and so he said, "This can't be Melisendra. It must be one of her maids. And so, if you give me 60 maravedis for her, I'll consider myself satisfied and well paid." In this fashion, prices were set for many other destroyed puppets, which were later modified by the 2 arbitrating judges to the satisfaction of all parties, and reached a total of 40 3/4 reales. In addition to this amount, which Sancho immediately took out of his purse and paid to him, Master Pedro requested 2 reales for the effort of catching the monkey. Give them to him, Sancho, said Don Quixote, not for catching the monkey, but for bending his elbow, and I would give 200 more as a reward to the person who can tell me with certainty that Señora Doña Melisendra and Señor Don Gaiferos were in France now with their people. There is a note after not catching the monkey, but for bending the elbow, and it says, mono is monkey, and mona is female monkey. Colloquially, it can also mean drinking binge or hangover. The Spanish reads, no para tomar el mono, sino la mona. So it's just a fun little phrase that doesn't quite get the same feel in translation. No one can tell us that better than my monkey, said Master Pedro, but not even the devil can catch him now, though I imagine that affection and hunger will force him to look for me tonight, and God will bring the dawn, and then we'll see. In short, the storm over the puppet show came to an end, and everyone ate supper in peace and good fellowship, at Don Quixote's expense, for he was generous in the extreme. Before daybreak, the man carrying the lances and halberds left, and shortly after dawn the cousin and the page came to take their leave of Don Quixote, the one to return home, and the other to continue his journey, and to help him on his way. Don Quixote gave the page a dozen reales. Master Pedro did not wish to engage in further disputes with Don Quixote, whom he knew very well, and so he arose before the sun, and after gathering up the relics of his puppet theatre and his monkey, he also set out to seek adventures. The innkeeper, who did not know Don Quixote, was as astonished by his madness as by his generosity. To conclude, Sancho paid him very well, by order of his master, and when it was almost 8 in the morning, they said goodbye, left the inn, and took to the road, where we shall leave them, for that will afford us the opportunity to recount other things that are pertinent to the narration of this famous history. End of chapter 26. All right. Yeah. Okay, so we're doing the puppet show, and Don Quixote is the worst audience member. I don't know why we expected him to not be, maybe because he doesn't super interrupt when people tell their like life story, but I guess because it's like a production, he feels the need to frequently interrupt, and apparently is so wrapped up in what's happening that it's real to him. And so when Melisandre and Gaiferos are being chased, he gets up and just destroys all of the puppets in the puppet show. And what I find interesting is that in destroying the puppets, he still destroyed the puppets for Melisandre and Gaiferos. But, I mean, he explains it away and was like, well, these aren't the real ones. Obviously, the real ones are in France, so I'm not paying for that. It's just so silly. It's just not silly. I feel like I say silly a lot. It's so interesting how, like, the realities are, like, switched back and forth and melded so many different times in Don Quixote's mind. All right. Let's see what other important and pertinent information is provided in this next chapter. Chapter 27. My nose is itchy, apologies. Allergies. Okay. Chapter 27, in which the identities of Master Pedro and his monkey are revealed, as well as the unhappy outcome of the braying adventure, which Don Quixote did not conclude as he had wished and intended. Cid Hamete, the chronicler of this great history, begins this chapter with the words, "I swear as a Catholic Christian," to which his translation says that Cid Hamete, swearing as a Catholic Christian when he was a Moor, which he undoubtedly was, meant only that just as the Catholic Christian, when he swears or should swear the truth, and tell the truth in everything he says, so too he was telling the truth, as if he were swearing as a Catholic Christian when he wrote about Don Quixote, especially when he told who Master Pedro was, as well as the soothsaying monkey who had amassed all those towns and villages with his divinations. He says then that whoever read the first part of this history will remember very clearly Gines de Pasamonte, to whom, along with the other galley slaves, Don Quixote gave his freedom in the Sierra Morena, a charitable act that was repaid with ingratitude and thanklessness by those ill-intentioned and badly behaved people. This Gines de Pasamonte, whom Don Quixote called Ginesillo de Parapilla, was the man who stole Sancho Panza's donkey, and since the how and when of that theft were not included in the first part through an error of the printers, many have led to attribute this printing error to the author's defective memory. To be brief, Gines stole the donkey when Sancho was sleeping on his back, using the same trick and device that Brunello used when Sacripante was at Albraca, and he took the horse out from between his legs, and then Sancho recovered the donkey, as has already been recounted. This Gines, fearful of being captured by the officers of the law who were looking for him so that he could be punished for his infinite deceptions and crimes, so numerous and of such a nature that he himself wrote a long book recounting them, decided to cross into the kingdom of Aragon, cover his left eye, and take up the trade of puppet master, for this and sleight of hand were things he knew extremely well. I knew we were gonna know who the puppet master was. I knew it. I knew it. I never would have guessed that it was Pasamonte, though, so that's fun. And that's so great that, like, it was a story that was told so long ago, and it is, like, circling back. I love it. It so happened that from a group of freed Christians who had come from Barbary, he brought the monkey and taught it to jump onto his shoulder at a certain signal, and then whisper, or seem to whisper, in his ear. When he had done this, before he would enter any village where he was taking his puppet theater and monkey, he would learn in a nearby village, or from anyone he could, what specific things had happened in the village and to whom, and after he had committed them to memory, the first thing he did was put on his puppet show, sometimes playing one story and sometimes another, but all of them happy and joyful and well known. When the show was over, he proclaimed the abilities of his monkey, telling the audience that he could see everything past and present, but that he had no skill in divining the future. For the answer to each question he would ask for 2 reales, and for some he lowered the price, depending on the mood of the questioners. On occasion, he would stay in houses where he would know certain incidents that had happened to the people who lived there, and even though they did not ask anything because they did not want to pay, he would signal the monkey, and then say that the animal had said something that fit perfectly with those incidents. In this fashion he gained remarkable credibility, and everyone came to see him. On other occasions, since he was so intelligent, he responded so that the answers matched the questions, and since no one examined him or pressed him to say how his monkey could be a soothsayer, he made a monkey of them all and filled his pockets. As soon as he entered the inn, he recognized Don Quixote and Sancho, and this made it easy for him to astound Don Quixote and Sancho Panza and everyone at the inn. But it would have cost him dear if Don Quixote had lowered his hand a little when he cut off King Marsilio's head and destroyed all his knights, as related in the previous chapter. This is what there is to say about Master Pedro and his monkey. Returning to Don Quixote of La Mancha, I will say that after he left the inn, he decided to see the banks of the Ebro River and the surrounding region before entering the city of Zaragoza, since he had enough time for everything before the tourney began. This was his intention as he traveled along the road, and he rode on it for 2 days without anything occurring that was worth writing down. And then on the 3rd day, as he was riding up a hill, he heard the loud sounds of drums and trumpets and the firing of harquebuses. At first he thought a regiment of soldiers was passing through, and in order to see them he spurred Rocinante and rode up the hill, and when he reached the top, he saw at the foot of the hill what appeared to be more than 200 men armed with a variety of weapons, such as pikes, crossbows, battle axes, halberds, lances, and a few harquebuses, and a good number of bucklers. Mega, thank you so much for the 10 months. Amazing. Thank you so much for the support. Glad you're here. Hello. He rode down the hillside and came so close to the squadron that he clearly saw the banners, observing the colors and noting the devices they displayed, especially one, a standard or pennant or white satin on which was painted, in a very lifelike manner, a donkey that seemed to be a small Sardinian, with his head raised, mouth open and tongue out, as if in the act of posture of braying. Around him these 2 verses were written in large letters: 2 mayors of 2 towns, they brayed, and not in vain. And there's a note after Sardinian, and it says, a breed of small donkeys native to Sardinia. Obviously. By means of this emblem, Don Quixote assumed that these people were from the braying village, and he told Sancho this as he read to him what was written on the banner. He also said that the man who told them about the matter had erred when he said that it had been 2 councilmen who brayed, because according to the verses on the banner, they had been mayors, to which Sancho Panza responded, Señor, that's of no importance, because it all might be that the councilmen who brayed in time became the mayors of their villages, and so can be called by both titles, especially since it doesn't matter to the truth of the history if the brayers were mayors or councilmen, since they really did bray, and the mayor's as good as a councilman for braying. In short, they realized and concluded that the offended village was coming out to do battle with another that had insulted it more than it was proper and fitting for good neighbors to do. Don Quixote approached them, to the great sorrow of Sancho, who never liked to find himself involved in these kinds of situations. The men in the squadron welcomed him into their midst, believing he was one of their supporters. Don Quixote, raising his visor, rode with a gallant air, and bearing up to the standard with the donkey, were the most distinguished men in the army, astounded with the usual astonishment that struck all those who saw him for the first time, gathered round to see him. Don Quixote, finding them so intent on looking at him, but not saying anything to him or asking any questions, wanted to take advantage of their silence by breaking his, and he raised his voice and said, "Good sirs, as earnestly as I can beg you not to interrupt a statement I wish to make, unless you see that it offends and angers you, if this should happen, at the smallest sign from you I shall place a seal on my mouth and clamp it on my tongue." Everyone told him to say whatever he wished, and they would gladly listen to him. With this license, Don Quixote continued, saying, "I, señores, am a knight-errant whose practice is arms and whose profession is favoring those in need of favor and helping those in distress. Some days ago I learned of your misfortune and the cause that moves you to constantly take up arms and seek revenge against your enemies. And having reflected time and time again on your case, I find that, according to the laws of the duel, you are mistaken in considering yourselves insulted, because no single individual can insult an entire village except by challenging it as a whole with being a traitor, since he does not know who in particular committed the treasonous act. We have an example of that in Don Diego Ordóñez de Lora, who challenged the entire population of Zamora because he did not know that Vellido Dolfos alone had committed the treason of killing his king, and so he challenged them all, and all were entitled to seek revenge and respond, although it is certainly true that Señor Don Diego took it a little too far, and even went beyond the limits of the challenge, for he had no reason to challenge the dead, the water, the loaves of bread, those about to be born, or all of the other things that are mentioned here. But then, when anger overcomes mother wit, no father, tutor, or restraint can curb the tongue. And there are two notes. The first note is after Don Diego Ordóñez de Lara, and it says, "The story is based on the cycle of ballads that deals with the struggle of power among the children of Fernando I and the siege of Zamora in the 11th century. And then the second note is after, for he had no reason to challenge, wrong part, those about to be born or all the other things that are mentioned there." And the note says, "The lines in the ballad read, I challenge you, Zamorans, as false and lying traitors. I challenge young and old. I challenge the quick and the dead. I challenge the plants in the field. I challenge the river fishes. I challenge your bread and meat, and also your water and wine." Since it is true that a single individual cannot offend an entire kingdom, province, city, nation, or people, it is evident that there is no reason to come out to avenge the challenges of the offense, for it is not one. Imagine if people from the village of Reloja were constantly killing those who called them by that name, or if the fusspots, the eggplant eaters, the whalers, the soap makers did, or any of the other names and nicknames that are always in the mouths of boys and people of little worth. And there are two notes. One after Reloja were constantly killing those who called them by that name. It says, This was a nickname given to the Andalusian town of Espartinas because, as the story goes, a clock was needed for the church tower, and the priest sent away to Seville for a nice little pregnant female clock. Reloja is the non-existent feminine form of reloj, or clock, so that the baby clocks could subsequently be sold. The same story was also told about other towns. And then there is a note after whalers, soap makers did, blah, 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 like that list of people. Nicknames given to residents of Valladolid, Toledo, Madrid, and Sevilla, respectively. Imagine if all these noble towns were to take offense and seek vengeance, their swords, like the slide of a sack butt, constantly going in and out in any dispute, no matter how trivial. No, no, God would not permit nor desire that. Prudent men and well-ordered nations take up arms and unsheath their swords and risk their persons, lives, and fortunes for only 4 reasons. First, in defense of the Catholic faith. Second, in self-defense, which is natural and divine law. Third, in defense of their honor, their family, and their fortune. Fourth, to serve their king in a just war, and if we wish to add a fifth, which can be considered the second, it is in defense of their country. To these 5 capital causes we can add a few others that are just and reasonable, and oblige men to take up arms. But anyone who does so for trifles and matters that are more laughable and amusing than insulting seems to lack all good sense. Moreover, taking unjust revenge, and no revenge can be just, is directly contrary to the holy law we profess, which commands us to do good to our enemies and love those who hate us, a commandment that, although it seems somewhat difficult to obey, is not, except for those who care less for God than for the world, and more for the flesh than for the spirit, because Jesus Christ, God and true man, who never lied, nor could he lie, nor can he, being our lawgiver, said that his yoke was gentle and his burden light, and so he would not command something that was impossible to obey. Therefore, Señores, your graces are obliged to divine and human laws to make peaceful. The devil take me, said Sancho to himself, if this master of mine isn't a theologian, and if he isn't, then he's as much like one as 2 peas in a pod. Don Quixote took a breath, and seeing that they were still listening silently, he wished to continue his speech, and would have if Sancho, with his unusual keenness, had not intervened when, seeing that his master had paused, had began to speak, saying, "My master, Don Quixote of La Mancha, who was once called the Knight of the Sorrowful Face and is now called the Knight of the Lions, is a very prudent gentleman who knows Latin and Spanish like a bachelor, and in all his dealings and advice he proceeds like a very good soldier, and he knows all the laws and rules about what is called dueling like the back of his hand, and so there's nothing else to do but listen to what he has to say, and if you're wrong, let it be on my head, especially since they say that it's foolish to lose your temper just because you hear somebody bray. I remember when I was a boy, I used to bray whenever I felt like it, and nobody held me back. And I did it so well and so perfectly that when I brayed, all the donkeys in the village brayed. But that didn't stop me from being my parents' son. And they were very honorable people. And even though this talent of mine was envied by more than a few of the conceited boys in my village, I didn't care at all. And so that you can see that I'm telling the truth. Wait and listen, because if you know this, it's like knowing how to swim once you've learned. You never forget. And then he held his nose and began to bray so enthusiastically that all the nearby valleys resonated with the sound. But one of the men who was near him, thinking he was mocking them, raised a long pole that he had in his hand and hit him so hard with it that he knocked Sancho Panza to the ground, senseless. Don Quixote, who saw Sancho so badly treated, turned, his lance in hand, on the man who had hit him, but so many men came between them that it was not possible to avenge his squire. Instead, seeing that a storm of stones came raining down on him, and that he was being threatened by 1,000 crossbows and a similar number of harquebuses, all of them aimed at him, he turned Rocinante's reins, and as fast as his best gallop could carry him, Don Quixote rode away, praying to God with all his heart to save him from that danger, and fearing at each step that a bullet would enter at his back and come out at his chest. At every moment he would take a breath to see if he still could. But the men in the squadron were content to see him flee, and they did not shoot him. They put Sancho across his donkey as soon as he came to, and they allowed him to go after his master, not because he was alert enough to guide the animal, but because the donkey followed in Rocinante's footsteps, since he did not like being without him. When Don Quixote had gone some distance, he turned his head and saw Sancho, and waited for him, for he saw that no one was following him. The men in the squadron stayed there until nightfall, and since their adversaries had not come out to do battle, they returned to their village joyfully and happily. If they had known about the ancient customs of the Greeks, on that spot and in that place, they would have raised a monument to their victory. End of chapter 27. The situations that they get themselves into is just so wild. Okay, so in this chapter we learned, oh wait, is this the chapter that we learned? Yes, so we learned who Master Pedro were, which is one of the galley slaves that they freed a long time ago. And he has since picked up this monkey and is basically grifting and doing puppet shows and things like that around different villages and stuff, and that's how he's like now making a living. We also learn that Don Quixote and Sancho Panza have come into this village, and they think it's the braying village because of the words that were like written outside the village or whatever. And you mean the monkey's not magic? Enchanted. The monkey has been enchanted. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Falcor. Sorry to dash those dreams you had. Pull the veil down. And Sancho just like ends up like unintentionally offending people, and so they just like hit him really hard, and then he, loses his sense for a minute, and instead of helping, once again, Don Quixote just leaves. Just leaves him there. Is like hoping that he himself doesn't get attacked. And then they put Sancho on his donkey, and his donkey just follows Rocinante because the donkey likes Rocinante. And that is where we are. And that's gonna be where we end today. Look, we're doing so good. So good. We're on page 642. We have 298 pages to go. So exciting. So yes, that's going to be where we end today. We will be picking up right where we left off. Oh, thank you so much. The chapter recaps help me sort of like make sense as to what is happening. Oh, that's it. I know. Mecca, you came in late. You came in late, my friend. But never fear. I'll be back, and we'll pick up right where we left off. But yeah, that's gonna be it for tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. So much for all of the resubs, for the new subscriptions, for the follows. You guys are too good to me. I hope you all have a great night. I, again, will be back on very soon, continuing right where we left off. I hope you have a good one. If I don't see you, I hope to see you even sooner. And as always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you, and I 1000% appreciate your support. Have a good night. Bye.